Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 421, Vial. Chapter 421, Vial. As he opened the box, he only saw one thing inside. It was an opaque glass vial that was colored dark green, about as thick and as long as his pinky finger, with a cork to top it off. After inspecting it with his supreme skill and saw no sign of poison mana inside the bottle, Michael picked it up and started to inspect it against the light. He was very careful. He didn't know if something inside the bottle would react upon shaking it, just like how a carbonated drink could explode when shaken. Upon first look, Michael was a little bit confused. After all, he saw nothing inside the glass vial, making him think that it was empty. But upon closer inspection, he noticed that there was a very small amount of liquid settling at the very bottom of the vial. The amount was so small that he thought it was just part of the glass design at the bottom. However, when he tilted it a little bit, the few droplets of liquid slowly flowed down the glass walls of the vial. From what he could see, the liquid was clear. But this definitely wasn't water. It was too thick and viscous to be water. It almost looked like oil with its consistency. And it was at that moment Michael realized what he was probably holding. He wasn't sure, as if he hadn't seen it before. But if he were to guess, then this was most probably a vial of the spirit of old. I have no information that would confirm your suspicion, answered ChatJK4, slightly ruining his pleasant mood. How could it not be Sue? Phlerexus took all of this effort to hide it here. He wouldn't do that with just a simple treasure. Of course, he could never really be sure that it was the spirit of old. The only way was to speak to a person who had already seen Sue in person. Virion came to mind, as she was the original one who had helped him get knowledge about magnetics in general. Cerberus could have also seen one himself, given his position within the Guild of Arcana as one of their mystic masters. He decided to go keep it for now and see if it was genuine or not. But even if he wasn't sure, Michael still made sure to be careful with the vial as he handled it. This was potentially a priceless treasure worth probably in the 100 millions or billions even. He wasn't going to take the chance, even if it just turned out to be normal oil. He used his shadow skill to wrap itself around the vial, making sure that it was securely placed. This would make sure that the vial wouldn't accidentally topple upside down as Michael teleported back to the nation of Reborn. With his preparations finished, he immediately turned into a shadow and left the underground tunnel. As he teleported, he immediately heard a mix of horrified screaming and excited cheering as landed backstage of the roller coaster park, which was now home to the fairies who feasted on all the emotions getting thrown around from the people in motion. He walked through the back door of the main control systems, finding the engineers and the operating manager of the very ride itself. Not only that, but there was also a certain fairy lounging on the window with a book in her hands as she watched her fellow fairies have a feast. Virion, can we talk? The old fairy didn't hesitate and nodded. Michael then motioned for the engineers to temporarily leave the room so that they could have privacy. What is it? Without further ado, Michael's shadow floated out from his feet and revealed a cylindrical bulge in its limb. The shadow slowly uncovered from the top, revealing the cork and the dark green vial containing the strange liquid oil substance. Virion immediately turned serious as she observed the vial. This was good news for Michael because it looked like she recognized it. Is it? Michael asked. Virion floated towards the vial, knocking on its glass and watching as the liquid reacted to her motion. She nodded, saying, "There's no doubt about it. This is a vial of the spirit of old. There's about 4 drops of them here. Where did you get it?" "I found it," Michael said, before explaining to her about Phlerexus and Batchrock Town. "I see. Then it makes even more sense. It seems that Phlerexus was trying to upgrade his mithril relic to accommodate his 4th stage diva. That's why he got 4 drops of Sue." Michael reigned in his excitement over finding 4 drops of Sue. He didn't know how much that was or how valuable it was, but getting his hands on just a single drop was already good enough in his books. "Do I need to worry about hauling this around? Will it explode or something?" Virion shook her head. "The spirit of old is quite resilient. As long as you don't spill it on the ground or on any surface, then it will be fine. In general, it's good to keep Sue in that original vial until you're ready to use it. That glass vial is forged from the very depths of the ocean, making it the only surface that can handle the spirit of old without reacting to it. Now, Michael would never waste even a drop of Sue, but he couldn't help but get curious. What happens if I spill it? He asked. According to the scrolls, the Sue will make any surface it touches become as hard as mithril. Although mithril is the strongest metal in the world, it's very wasteful to use Sue in order to make it. Michael was even more sure he wasn't going to waste the Sue. He could make as many mithril artifacts as he wanted. But Sue was always going to be in limited quantity unless of course he could get in contact with the Ocean King, but that was a pipe dream. Thanks, Virion. I appreciate the help. Michael left Virion to her own and transported himself over to Cerberus' private house in the nation of Reborn. The old man had chosen quite a spot for himself, having a backyard with a pond with fishes. And he didn't know where he got the idea from, but his house looked like one of those old Japanese houses made for ancient samurais with tatami flooring and wooden canopies. Ah, Michael. To what do I owe the pleasure? Cerberus asked, looking at peace as he sat cross-legged in the middle of his pond. I just wanted to get your opinion. On what? On what I should do next. How can I apply Sue to my mithril artifact? Cerberus opened one of his eyes, intrigued. So you have made your own mithril artifact. That's nice. What did you choose? A wand, I hope. Michael reached down his pocket and took out a block of metal that looked like the same shape as a gold bar. Then, he tossed the block over to Cerberus for him to inspect. The old man watched as the block of metal came over towards him. His eyes tried to discern what kind of weapon it was, but found that it didn't look like anything he had ever seen before. And just before it landed on Cerberus' palms, the drone suddenly burst into life, revealing its 4 propellers on the corner sides and buzzing up and away from Cerberus, startling him. What the foo? His words were cut off by the drone's sound. Whiz. Chapter 422. Suhao? Chapter 422. Suhao? What is this? Cerberus blurted out, trying to understand the metal monstrosity that was hovering in front of his face. One might have thought it was an animal of some sorts. That's my mithril artifact. It's called a drone. Cerberus knew nothing about drones, but he did know that Michael had created another one of his otherworldly objects that seemed to defy all laws of physics and magic. A flying weapon? That is something else. It certainly is unique, Cerberus muttered. The prospect of a magnetic not being limited by his weapon's range was something that was quite impressive to think about. As expected, Michael had found yet another overpowered ability to keep himself above even those people touted as geniuses and prodigies. Cerberus didn't know how Michael kept doing these seemingly impossible things time and time again. At this point, he hoped to have developed a tolerance for Michael's surprises, yet he was still caught off guard whenever he revealed something. Cerberus now felt sort of anxious whenever he met Michael, thinking that he would pull out another world-breaking invention that would nullify all of his efforts as a magician. If you want to make this mithril artifact your weapon, then you have to imbue it with blood and the spirit of old. Now, you have to be patient on this, Michael. Sue is very hard to get and very expensive as well. Not just anybody can get their hands on it, Cerberus chattered on. Cerberus? The Tower Master didn't let Michael interrupt. Now, listen here, Michael. In Cerberus' mind, this was a chance for Michael to learn about the hardships of a normal human. In reality, people just don't magically get what they want whenever they want it. Michael had been living quite a privileged life, not in terms of money per se, which he totally does by the way, but in terms of other intangible qualities like talent. While people worked hard to study magic, Michael could master it in a single second. While people worked hard to earn money, Michael invents a new machine and earns millions easily. While 99% of people don't have a chance of becoming magnetic, Michael stumbles upon it and becomes one without question. The spirit of old is something that is rarely distributed. No amount of money could buy them because most companies hoarded it for themselves. Cerberus, I have one. Yes, you have one, but it's very much impossible to get one if you don't. Say what now? Michael had in his hands a dark green vial containing a few drops of a crystal-clear liquid with the consistency and viscosity of oil. Cerberus' jaw dropped. No way. The old man couldn't help but slump as he realized all of his words were for nothing. He then whipped his head up to the skies and cursed whoever god resided up there. You unfair gods! Can't you not be on his side for once? He then turned to Michael. How did you get a vial of Sue? And 1, 2. Have 4 drops of it already. Michael explained everything about FlareCorp, and how he stumbled upon his Flarex's hidden storage room containing this vial. I guess it's a karmic reward, Cerberus sighed. Your company has been pestered by FlareCorp, so it's only natural that you obtained his loot. Still, that didn't make it all reasonable. Cerberus was starting to think that the gods were truly on Michael's side. Hey, tell the truth. Is it true what they say about you and the Iron Maiden? Cerberus questioned. Michael couldn't believe that the rumor had spread this far. No, that's a long story, but that's besides the point. What do I need to do to coat my mithril artifact with Sue? Cerberus sighed. before leading Michael inside his wooden Japanese-themed home with his hands behind his back like some monk. Then they entered Cerberus' tatami room, where Cerberus asked Michael to remove his shoes. Where did he get this idea from? Cerberus took out a scroll from one of his cabinets and unfurled it on the floor, letting Michael see it in its entirety. Once unfurled, Michael saw a large map of a city. But not just any city. On the top of it, the name of the territory was inscribed. It was Metropolis. You've met the Legacies, correct? There was one of them called Bobby. He's a main descendant from the Hephaestus conglomerate, and he owns a smithing company. He owns this lower east part of Metropolis. Cerberus circled the map with his fingers, and a magic light appeared and highlighted the lower right side of Metropolis. Coding Su onto a mithril artifact is a delicate process. It requires intimate knowledge of abilities, magnetics, and mithril relics. Binding the weapon towards the person is a process that not even magic or nature can describe. One wrong move could waste both the Su and the weapon. The only viable technique has been discovered by the founder of the Hephaestus conglomerate, and has been passed down through the generations. Bobby has undoubtedly inherited this technique as well. If you want to have your mithril artifact be coated with your Su, then you will have to recruit his help. In the end, Michael really had to go to Metropolis if he wanted to use Su. Thankfully though, Bobby looked to be a very reasonable person. He even offered Michael a free armor set when they first met. So, I just need to get help from Bobby? That's easy. Cerberus nodded. Yes, getting Bobby's help is the easy part. But the problem is that you can't just waltz into their company and demand for his help. Now, you may be known as the leader of Reborn here in the lower parts of the continent, but in Metropolis you are probably still unknown. Compared to that, Bobby is one of the legacies. His company is high up in the ranks. There are rules to be followed. Specifically, just one. You have to be a member of the association in Metropolis. What association? Michael asked. The association is the gathering of all companies and groups operating in Metropolis. Basically, you have to register with them in order to get a permit to be able to work inside Metropolis. Without that permit, you won't be able to transact with other members of the association, meaning you won't be able to hire Bobby's help. All in all, getting that permit would basically hit two birds with one stone. Michael had already been planning on expanding to Metropolis, so he would have needed that permit anyway. Now, he could also get Bobby's help as a bonus. Now, I have to warn you, Metropolis is a big market. There are a lot of other companies in your position who want to get a piece of the pie in Metropolis. The competition there is going to be fierce. Not in terms of companies competing against companies to get a spot, but instead, companies are trying to get the public to accept their products or services. That is the real hurdle. Why would people want to buy something new and unfamiliar if they could already buy it from companies already in Metropolis? For most companies, that is a big hurdle. Chapter 423, Wanting that permit. Chapter 423, Wanting that permit. Metropolis was the mecca for entrepreneurs looking to develop their companies. The market inside the territory was so good that simply becoming a part of the association would increase their rankings in the Golden 500 by at least 10 places. But of course, not everyone could join the Metropolis Association. If everyone was allowed, then there would be too much competition within the territory and the market could end up becoming divided. Only the best of the best could have a chance of joining, much less succeed in this competitive market. That was why the association was very picky with the companies they accepted. According to Cerberus, only 5 companies every year get their permit to establish their companies in Metropolis. The remaining spots could change depending on the situation in Metropolis. If there's a company that ends up becoming bankrupt and unable to continue business, only then will a spot in the association open up. This means that on average, about 5 companies die off in Metropolis. Cerberus then looked at Michael. For you, I reckon that the association will immediately give you your permit once they see that you're a Vanderbilt. But knowing you, I bet that you won't use that name to your advantage. That was exactly the truth. Michael didn't want to use his last name as an easy pass into Metropolis. He wanted to get in there by his own merit so that the accomplishment would just fall onto him, not the Vanderbilt name. He built the Reborn company from the ground up without his grandfather's help. He didn't need it now. How will I get the permit? Just show up in Metropolis and ask for the association. That's right, Cerberus affirmed. They will give you a test, a simple one. You have to show that your company can survive in Metropolis environment by giving you a temporary stall to sell your product or your service. And by the end of the testing period, if you have satisfied enough customers, only then will the association give you your permits. Michael took all of Cerberus' words in, with ChatJK4 taking notes in the background. I'll get that permit, he declared. Cerberus smiled. I know you will. Good luck, boy. Once he was done talking with Cerberus, Michael immediately went back to their headquarters to convene with the others. He wanted to tell them about the next course of action for this company. So he gathered everyone at a long table. He was sitting at the very end. On the right of him was Shiina, followed by the other Dragonborns. Right next to the Dragonborns were the two orc chieftains as well as Kong, their chief engineer. On his left was Yuna. Fudge was supposed to sit there, but the ninja slime preferred to sit on Yuna's lap instead. So she was the one who was sitting right next to Michael. Beside Yuna was his parents, Lilia and Bart. As much as Michael joked, they were important to him as well as for this company. Right next to Lilia was Castell, and the one next to her was Grieve, who had been late to the meeting and had to take a seat on the very last spot because he forgot there was even a meeting at all. Michael dear, have you finally decided to announce something? Lilia teased, nudging Yuna at her side. No, Mom. This is serious. I want to talk about our expansion in the Queen's region. Now that we have covered the entire southern tip, it is now time for us to expand further out north. Our next stop is in Metropolis. A flurry of excited murmurs rang out within the room. As you wish, Lord Michael. Thanks to the supplies and resources we got from the companies that want to install their own restaurants in the truck stop, we were able to finish the Golden Road expansion to the east, as well as a little bit further up north, Shiina reported. It will probably take a few weeks before we reach Batchrock Town. A week less if we spend more to hurry it up, Castell added. The two women, as per usual, handled the day-to-day business of Reborn, so they were the ones most excited about this expansion. Ho ho ho, Metropolis. I haven't heard that name in a long while, Grieve muttered. Grieve, are there any warriors over there that I can defeat? My biceps have been aching for a fight. Zion, please. We're doing real business here. Act more mature. Shiina reprimanded him. I agree. Why pick a fight when we can just relax? Jaku added. We've just ended our punishment from the girls' team. It's time we just lay back without worrying about paperwork. You won't get to, Shiina replied. If we want to hurry the construction of the Golden Road and reach Metropolis within a month, then we need all hands on board. Contrast to them, Omisu just quietly fidgeted in her seat and held her pen steady. She wanted to help with the paperwork. Yuna, on the other hand, looked at Michael. You do know that you will need a permit in order to conduct your business in Metropolis, right? His dad, Bart, seconded Yuna's words. I heard it's hard to get a permit there, and even harder to survive. Michael nodded at their concerns. I know, and that's why I've gathered all of you here today. I'm planning on getting a permit from the Metropolis Association. Metropolis has a complicated judicial system. There are many rules and regulations when it comes to companies, Yuna warned. He looked at her. I know, and that's why I need your help. As Yuna stared at Michael's eyes, she felt a flush of heat come to her cheeks. Feeling embarrassed, she quickly turned her head away. Humph, fine, she said with a begrudging tone. But you'll owe me big time. And this time, you can't use the excuse of being busy to get out. Michael chuckled. Fine. Meanwhile, Bart and Lilia quietly poked one another as they watched the two interact with a bit more closeness than before. Michael had to clear his throat to stop them. Ahem. Anyway, according to Cerberus, we'll be given a stall in a designated place in Metropolis where we'll have to show off our products/services to the locals. Once we've earned their votes, we'll be given a permit to work in Metropolis. We'll be able to expand our business by then. Is everyone clear? They all gave him a look of confidence and excitement. The Dragonborns nodded at him. The orc chieftains did their rituals, and Grieve, although he had no eyes, showed his excitement through his clacking ribs. He put his hand on the table. All hands on three. Everyone reached over from their side of the table, piling on their hands in a circle. Michael's hands were on top, with Yuna just below his. He smiled at her before counting down. On 3, 1, 2. Huzzah! Grieve cheered prematurely. Ah, you went in too early, Zion complained. I seem to have forgotten how to count, ho ho ho. Everyone started chuckling to themselves. Meanwhile, Michael felt a hand grip on his hand. He looked and it was Yuna, who gave him a reassuring nod. Chapter 424. Entering Metropolis. Chapter 424. Entering Metropolis. After their initial meeting came the nitty-gritty details. Castell, I want you to prepare our products to launch. The soap line, the bicycles, the hand watches. Everything that can be sold in a stall. Castell nodded. Understood, young master. Here is an itemized list of what I think we should sell. Even before Michael told her what to do, she had already thought up a list of their products to be sold. Good. Now Kong, I want you to construct a stall that will be selling the products in. I want it to pop out. You can talk with Yuna to see the specifications. I'll have to first browse the rulebooks from the association in Metropolis. But I think that there's no limit as to what kind of stall you can make as long as it's small and mobile, Yuna said. I'll visit Metropolis later tonight to officially ask for a permit. I'll ask for a rule book, he promised her. Be you two too. Ra. Ta-ta. The two orc chieftains immediately presented themselves to Michael, showing off their unique traits, muscles, and quills. Boss, I offer you the services of the Orcanine Shadows. They shall endeavor to spread their clones and find out more about our competition in Metropolis, said Naruto. We and the Orcupine Shadows offer you protection while on your visit to Metropolis. We shall also create safe zones that our clones can gather in, said Sasuke. I appreciate you both, but don't get too overboard with your spying and protecting. Metropolis has a lot of strong people, magnetics to be exact, and they have abilities that can easily discover your shadows if you attach it to them. But as long as you survey in neutral zones, and not invade other people's territory, then you're good. The two orc chieftains bowed, and did their rituals. Those abilities are cheats, Fudge complained. This actually soothed Michael's worries about Fudge going overboard again. At least he knew that the little ninja slime wouldn't be able to do its pranks on those magnetics. Kukuku. That's fine. I don't have to infiltrate them through magic. There's always a chance to infiltrate them through belief, Fudge muttered under his breath. At the end of the night, their plans were finalized. Though to be honest, it was only Castel, Shiina, and Yuna who did all the work with the preparation. As bad as it sounded, he and the others had already backed out by the afternoon, with Zion and Fudge inviting him over to play some board games. Suffice to say, they were given a lecture by the girls at night as punishment. On the next day, Michael was ready to go over to Metropolis and officially submit his application for the permit in Metropolis. Thankfully, Jimmy, their news correspondent, had already gone off to Metropolis much earlier. And of course, Michael had left his own shadow on Jimmy, so he was able to transport himself on the gates very easily. But before he left, Yuna pulled him aside and had a talk with him. Hey, please whatever you do not listen to a word she says, okay? Michael looked at her as if she was joking. She? Who? What are you even talking about? Yuna looked like she wanted to say something, but ended up not saying anything at all. Just remember that I told her none of those things. Okay? Now, Michael was even more curious about what she was talking about. But no matter how he probed, she just kept deflecting the conversation. But whatever it was, it seemed personal. With the way she was acting reminded him of how he acted whenever his mother and father did some very embarrassing setups with her. Fine. I'll take your words into consideration, he promised her, and that seemed to take a load off her mind. Okay, you can go now, she said. Michael chuckled and shook his head. He truly didn't know how women worked. Finally, he focused on his body and used his supreme skill to sense all of the shadows he left behind in the Queen's region. There were probably millions of them right now, swarming the Angora city and the grafted cluster specifically. However, there was one of them much further north of the Queen's region, bypassing even that of Batrock Town. Concentrating on this small target, he saw Jimmy standing by the tall walls of a territory, waiting for Michael to come with him. With a single thought, Michael grabbed onto that shadow clone he left behind in Jimmy's feet and yanked himself over in that direction. He immediately turned into a shadow, finding himself in a black realm before he whizzed past everything. And within a second, he reached his destination. Meanwhile, back in their headquarters, Cerberus couldn't help but shake his head as he saw Michael disappear off to Metropolis with such ease. So unfair, he muttered. Only someone like Michael with complete control over mana could sense his own shadow creation that was almost a month of travel away. And only someone with near limitless man could transport himself over there without even breaking a sweat. Truly was unfair. Michael opened his eyes and found himself right next to Jimmy. Boss Michael, you're finally here. It's good to see you. How was the trip? Jimmy breathed out his exhaustion. Next time, I think I'll take your shadow transportation. The trip was very boring. I can't wait until you can install train tracks and roads here. That's what I'm here for, he answered. The two of them walked over to the gates manned by soldiers. There were plenty of carriages and horseback riders coming inside Metropolis, and all of them were being inspected by the guards for their paperwork. Permits please, said the guard to one of the carriages carrying barrels of wine. The rider brought out a golden seal to the guards, which confirmed their identity. All right, you can come in, he said, with the gates slowly rising up to let the carriage inside. Next, the soldier said, and it was finally time for Jimmy and Michael. After seeing that they were only on horseback, the soldier assumed that they were just travelers. What's the purpose of your visit? Tourism? Business? Please state honestly. Jimmy immediately presented one of his letters with a stamp on it. I'm a journalist. I wrote to the newspaper company here for an article. The soldier took a good look at the letter, especially the red stamp at the bottom, before nodding his head. All right, come on in. The soldier waved the two of them in, thinking that the golden-haired boy was accompanying the journalist. Is there a problem? The soldier asked. The purpose of my visit is different, Michael stated. I want to get a permit from the association. The soldier looked at Michael. surprised that someone as young as him was willing to brave the difficulties of getting a permit. "Well, good luck, young man," said the soldier. "One of our soldiers will guide you over to the association, and they will be the one to brief you on the rules. Is that clear?" Michael nodded. "Who should I ask for?" "Just ask for Claudia Montgomery. She's the one that's in charge of permits." Chapter 425. Meeting Claudia. "Wait, Montgomery?" The soldier nodded. "Yes, that famous Montgomery. One branch of their family is in charge of the association. They make sure to manage all the companies and groups inside Metropolis while keeping a neutral side." In hindsight, Michael shouldn't have been surprised. After all, the Montgomerys were famous for being diplomats all over the globe. Their main jobs was to settle all conflicts and preside over any agreements between them. It made sense that only their family could manage such an influential group like the association. Does Yuna know Claudette? The answer to that was already answered when he remembered what Lass said to him before he left. She seemed very nervous about him coming into the association, probably because she knew that he would eventually cross paths with one of her family members. If that was the case, then she should have come here, Michael thought. That way, she could help him out while also having a family reunion at the same time. Eventually, a carriage came over to the entrance and the soldier boarded inside, guiding Michael to sit beside him. "I'll take you directly to the association. Meanwhile, sit tight and have a view of Metropolis," the soldier said. Michael sat on the carriage, feeling the bumps of the road as the horse trotted along the stone brick roads. This made him miss the nation of Reborn even more. After all, this carriage was mind-bogglingly slow while giving its passengers the worst traveling experience ever. He eventually settled down and entertained himself by looking out the window and observing Metropolis up close. As expected, he saw a large black tower in the distance, piercing through the skies and releasing a huge amount of mana through the clouds. This was none other than the Magic Tower of Metropolis, which was quite bigger and taller than all the magic towers he had ever been on. Looking ahead, he also saw the entirety of a castle up ahead. The whole structure was perched upon a mountain that seemed to have been leveled into a plateau for easier construction. And since this was a major territory in the Queen's region, Michael guessed that the Duke probably lived there. And right beside the castle, he saw the Knight's Court. Wherever there was a castle, there would always be a branch of the Order of the Heavenly Knights right next to it. After using his supreme skill to sense the mana of the entire territory, Michael was overwhelmed to see that the visible part of the metropolis that he saw was just a fourth of the entire landmass in total. This was perhaps the biggest civilization he had ever seen. He finally understood how the legacies could fit inside just one territory without clashing. It turned out that there were enough pieces for everyone. Eventually, the carriage came to a stop and the soldier guided Michael onto a large stone building propped up by many pillars on all sides. "This is the association. Just go inside and they'll guide you where you need to go." "Good luck," said the soldier as he went back onto the carriage and went back the way he came. Michael stood at the very first steps of the association building, looking up at this giant piece of architecture that reminded him of the famous Parthenon temple back in his previous world. Except, this one was in very pristine condition and about thrice as big. He walked up the steps, seeing people wearing white chitons as they walked and talked with each other. Michael guessed that this was the uniform for association employees as their chests had a giant, made out of pillars stitched onto it. Eventually, he entered inside the marble building and saw a reception area, where a woman wearing a white tunic greeted him with a smile. "Welcome to the association. What can I do for you, young sir?" "I want to establish my company here in Metropolis," he answered. "Ah, so you want a permit then? If you could please write down your name and your company's name in this paper, and I will process your application shortly." The receptionist gave him a paper to write on, and he quickly took out the ballpoint pen in his pockets and began writing in it. "Oh, I forgot to give you a quill and ink. I'll go get it." She noticed that Michael was writing on the paper without using any ink at all. He continued to scribble on the paper, never running out of ink. The receptionist was so surprised by this that she ended up staring off into nothing as Michael handed her back the paper. "Excuse me, miss?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just interested in that thing you have. Does it not need any ink?" she asked. "It's all inside," he replied, giving her the pen and letting her try it out for herself. "Go ahead and write something on the paper." The receptionist took out a blank piece of paper and began scribbling out a few words, with the pen magically bringing out ink in the perfect amount. No spillage, no blots, nothing. "This is amazing," she praised. Her eyes almost turned into starry skies as she wondered at the amazing ballpoint pen. Miss? About the permit." "Oh, forgive me. Now that I have your application, you just need to wait right there on the chair for your turn." Michael looked over to the side and saw plenty of people, about 10 in total, sitting on the chair and waiting for their turn to enter the room. "Thanks. By the way, you can keep that pen if you'd like." Her eyes bulged. "Really? Thank you." She took her new ballpoint pen and rubbed it against her cheeks. She would treat this as her treasure from now on, as it would save her a lot of trouble while being a receptionist. She then looked at the inscription on the long cylindrical piece of the pen. "Reborn," she muttered to herself. Meanwhile, Michael sat on the seat and waited for his turn. He looked at his seatmates and chatted with them in the meantime. And just like him, they were all leaders of companies wanting to step foot inside Metropolis. There were even some people who were on their second or third try to get a permit. They had to wait a year after they failed before they could try again. He learned very valuable lessons from them as they gave him tips and things that he should avoid. They were all quite nice, which Michael appreciated. Eventually, it had finally come for his time to meet with the permit manager of the association. He stepped forward, seeing the name Claudia Montgomery etched onto the wooden door. He knocked a few times first before he entered. Once inside, he saw a large office made out of marble, with oil lamps flickering with light on every corner. There were scrolls and papers all around the desk in the front, slightly obscuring the person behind it. "Good morning. I'd like to get a permit," he said to Claudia. "I see. So you're the man who stole my niece's heart." Claudia got up from her seat and stared at Michael with her hands crossed on her chest. Chapter 426. Being a Montgomery. Chapter 426. Being a Montgomery. Claudia put her hands on her hips and waited for Michael to speak. Her combative expression, coupled with her wild wolf-cut black hair, made Michael feel defensive. "What? You know me?" "Of course I know you. Michael. Reborn. Those are the two words that have been the subject of my letters with Una. My cute little niece. She used to visit me every other month. But now, it's just letters." Michael raised his hands, trying to show his innocence. "I didn't do anything," he insisted. "Oh yes, you did. You stole my Una's heart. Otherwise, she would have visited me by now. What kind of black magic have you done to make her stay with you this long?" Michael shrugged. "I don't know. We just have the same idea about living life in comfort." Claudia eyed Michael, still suspicious. "You can ask her yourself. I'll come get her." She waved her hands, stopping him. "There's no need to do that. I was just messing with you. I was just curious as to what made my cute little niece finally come out of her grandmother's shadow." He stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, you see, Una is being primed to become the next successor of Zir Montgomery, the current worldwide diplomat that settles all disputes between continents. As part of her training, she was supposed to go around the world, travel, and gain experience about what it takes to become a good diplomat. One of the traits that she had to acquire was being unbiased. She needed to be a quiet observer, a fly on the wall on all things that was happening in the world. That way, when a conflict has to be resolved, she can mediate between the two parties and act with clear judgment. Now, imagine my surprise when I saw from her letters that she decided to hitch her wagon onto this unknown company called Reborn, being led by a child named Michael. She was abandoning her efforts to become neutral. She actively picked a side. Michael didn't know that Una's actions would be such a big deal. He thought there was nothing wrong with her helping him out on some contracts. He didn't know it would violate the neutrality of Montgomery. And why does it matter that she chose to follow me and Reborn? Claudia put her hands on the table. It's important because it decides her future. Now, she'll have to stick by your company's side and represent it as her chosen side. She can't arbitrate conflicts involving other parties, only those involving the Reborn company. Her path has basically been set. Your company's downfall is her downfall. Michael took a deep breath. He didn't feel sorry about this at all because he knew that Una made her own choice. She must have had her own reasons for becoming a part of Reborn. "I can't change her decision," he told Claudia. "But I can damn make sure that it's the right one." Claudia was startled as she saw the seriousness in Michael's eyes. It wasn't the kind of thing that a boy his age could show. And for a brief second, she felt as if Michael's words were the truth. There was confidence in his voice that wasn't just backed by empty bravado. He seemed to be really convinced of his own eventual success. "All right, I admit that you do have some claim to your words. Reborn Company, it says here that your company has achieved the 450th rank in the Golden 500. Wow," she praised as she looked at the paperwork on her desk. "But that's not just the only problem I have with you. It's your name. Vanderbilt. Are you planning on using that to get the permit?" Claudia asked, peering through his eyes. "I can get the permit on my own merits," he replied. Claudia nodded, a hint of respect seen on her face. "I would have refused you outright if you did. You would have been another one of those inheritors who demanded a permit just because their last name coincided with a conglomerate. I'm starting to understand why Una picked you. You look laid back and gentle, but there's a hidden tiger within you that is quite feisty. Still, she couldn't have picked a better family name if she wanted her grandmother mad. Zir has always been petty about the Vanderbilts ever since Eyes found a loophole in her contracts." Michael quickly raised his hand. "That's just my last name. Me and my company have no affiliation with the Vanderbilt business. He corrected her. Either way, a Vanderbilt, has taken her favorite grandchild from her. And as you may not know, a grandmother's overprotectiveness is something that can be akin to hellfire. Are you still willing to back up your words? Michael didn't know why that mattered, but he didn't change his answer. Reborn will succeed, and will succeed with us. Give me a chance to show it, he promised. Claudia clapped her hands together. Okay then, just like any other company, I will give you a spot in the market to sell your product or services to the general public. You will be limited to a small stall about as large as a carriage. Here is a rulebook for you to browse. She tossed him a thick red book titled, How to Get a Permit 101. Take all the time you need. If you have questions, just ask. No need. I understand it all perfectly, Michael replied. Claudia stopped and looked at Michael. What do you mean? I read the book. No, you didn't. You just flipped through the pages without reading it. Michael put down the book back at her desk. Don't worry. I got it all on here, he said, pointing to his brain. Thanks to ChatGK4, just a single read-through of the entire book was enough for his trusty old AI assistant to understand perfectly the rules of the test. Candidates are given 1 week to sell products and services in the market. The total number of sales and profits will be tallied at the end. If it's high enough to beat just a single one of the local companies here in Metropolis, then you can grant me a permit for my business. Michael recited perfectly, word for word, without any error. This would have been impossible if he had just parsed through the pages like Claudia thought. That's correct, she muttered. Thanks. I'll be back tomorrow to set up the stall, Michael said before he left the room, leaving Claudia alone and still shocked. That boy. He's very surprising. I'll give him that. Although she was giving him a hard time earlier, she was very much rooting for him to succeed. After all, she knew just how hard it was to earn a permit in this territory. By her estimation, Michael and his Reborn company would probably find it hard to get the sales they wanted in Metropolis. After all, this place was completely different from places like the King's Region or Angora City. Metropolis customers were hard to please. And just as she was about to go back to her seat, she noticed a bunch of excited murmurings from outside her door. Curious, Claudia walked out of her room to find a lot of people crowding over the reception desk, creating a sea of people. Almost every worker in the association building was trying to squeeze themselves to see whatever it was they were trying to see. What's going on over here? She asked them. Miss Claudia, we're just amazed by this thing called a ballpoint pen. Chapter 427. Preparations for the stall. Claudia immediately parted the crowd and checked in on this ballpoint pen that they'd been clamoring about. And when the receptionist began writing on the paper without any ink, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She even picked up the paper and started to wipe her hands along the written words. Surprisingly, there wasn't any smudge at all. This is amazing. Where did you get this? The receptionist looked over the entrance of their building. It was that golden-haired boy from earlier. He gave it to me. It's from Michael, Claudia muttered in surprise. This ballpoint pen would be considered a treasure here in Metropolis. And the fact that Michael willingly gave it to a receptionist as a nice little gift meant that he had plenty of them in store. Judging from the emblem of Reborn on the pen, Claudia realized that this was probably what Michael's company was selling. So that's what turned them into the 450th ranked company in the entire world, she realized. With this kind of innovation in printing and writing, she could finally understand how a company from the lower part of the Queen's region had achieved so much so soon. With these pens, she knew that Michael had a chance in obtaining that permit. Meanwhile, Michael teleported back to their headquarters to reconvene with his team. As expected, Castell and Shiina took care of business quickly without any trouble. They had both prepared a collection of items that they could sell in the stalls. These items helped people in their everyday lives, improving their quality of life. Things like eyeglasses, watches, matches, and other such little trinkets were their biggest sellers. For convenience, boss, we have asked the Shadows to transport these items directly to Metropolis. Even when using automobiles, they would take weeks to transfer, Shiina said. Michael didn't mind, and he would have transferred the items himself if needed. He then went out of their headquarters and into the warehouse just next door. This was where Kong and the other engineers created their prototypes for projects that Michael had them work on. And now, it looked like they had already finished the mobile stall that they were going to use for Metropolis. Wow! You guys went all out, he praised them. Usually, stalls in this world were only made out of basic materials like wood and other light materials. Since this was supposed to be mobile, they didn't use metals for their construction. What Kong and the engineers had made were something very similar to something Michael would see during an event. It was like those food trucks equipped with a generator to power it up with lights and possibly a whole kitchen setup. Not only that, but they made the whole thing from a scrapped automobile truck so that it could be driven anywhere despite how heavy it was. Boss, what do you think? Kong asked, his face full of expectation. Michael nodded his head, approving of their work. Nicely done, he said to them. Thankfully, the rulebook said nothing about how big a stall had to be. As long as it could be packed up and tucked away each day, then it was fair game. They had probably come up with that rule because they never expected Michael to bring an entire truck with him as a stall. He then inspected the interior, seeing an entire living room of space inside. There was a very large fridge, some cookware, and of course a stack of tables and desks to display their wares. This is perfect, he said. He didn't plan on just selling some everyday stuff. He was planning on selling food as well. Since the criteria for the permit was the number of sales in 1 week, Michael realized that a cheap, addicting fast food was a recipe for success. Unlike things like glasses or watches, people could buy food every day. Still, he was going to take advantage of their large stall space. He would be selling everything from AZ. The best part about this was that since he would be manning the stall for the entire duration, he could simply just teleport any of the items that he needed to sell. His idea was that he would set up a large display of everything that he was selling. Everything. He would display one of each. And then, when a customer wanted to buy one of those, then he would discreetly use his shadows to take it out from their warehouses in Angora City or the nation of Reborn. The rulebook said nothing about a limit of what they could sell. But then again, they probably never expected that there would be a Michael who would sell hundreds of items in a single stall. As for the stall itself, he would use it for the food portion of their wares. The reason why street foods back in his previous world were so popular was because people could see how they were made right in front of their eyes. So he would use that to his advantage to gain customers. Thanks for your hard work, guys. This is amazing, he said to the engineers. No problem, boss. Now that he was done with the preparations for their stall, Michael had one last thing to settle. He closed his eyes and searched for a specific person in the entirety of their headquarters. Once he had locked in on them, he quickly transported himself towards their location. He emerged from the shadows, with the person in front of him unaware of his arrival. Ahem. Do you have anything to say to me? He asked Yuna. Yuna turned around and immediately put on an innocent face. What do you mean, haha? Michael sighed. Why didn't you tell me that your aunt was in charge of the association? She was a lot to handle. She was barraging me with a lot of questions and all that. Oh, haha. Ha. Yuna tried to pass off the awkwardness as laughter, but in the end, she finally gave in. I'm sorry, but if you knew that she was my aunt, then you would have asked me to join you. And just like you said, she can be quite the difficult person to handle. Michael crossed his arms. So, in short, you fed me to the wolf? It's for a good reason, she insisted. If I had gone with you, she would have been a lot harder to deal with. Trust me. She would be going on and on about neutrality and all that stuff. She already talked to me about that, he said. Oh, tee-hee. Yuna tilted her head, squinted her eyes, and poked a finger on her cheek. This was her signature pose back in the days. This was the kind of pose that would have sent an entire arena of people into a roaring applause. And Michael, try as he might, couldn't help but be affected by this psychic spell. He quickly turned away, hiding his blush. Fine, fine. Just next time, you better talk to her, so that she won't ask me those questions again. Yuna nodded. Yup, I promise. She quickly left the room, skipping happily with her hands behind her back. Meanwhile, Michael was left in the room, wiping off a sweat off his forehead thinking, that was close. Chapter 428. To delay or not to delay. The next day, with all of their preparations done, Michael went back to Metropolis to find their proper place where their stall would be. According to the rulebook, any applicant would be given a designated space in the market plaza of Metropolis. This was a large open space where people from all sides of the territory spent their day leisurely walking by and occasionally buying some products from the stalls. This was where new companies got tested to see if locals wanted their product or not. Michael walked inside this plaza and realized just how large this place was. It was definitely bigger than a stadium from his previous world. This place was teeming with greenery and natural life, just like a real park. He could see people walking through the grasses, taking picnics under the trees, and some were even leisurely riding their horses around. This place was probably one of the most crowded places he had seen in this world, aside from his own territories. And scattered throughout the parks were wooden stalls, some very small, and some large enough to be a cabin, built along the walkways of the plaza. Their businesses ranged from food to armories to books. It was all very varied. It was easy to guess that these companies were in the same boat as him. They also wanted a permit. Wanting to find his own designated spot for his stall, he walked over towards the entrance where a man wearing the white tunic uniform of the association was standing guard. Excuse me, I'm supposed to get a space for my stall. Where can I put it? He asked the employee. The man quickly took out his scroll and asked Michael for his name. What's your company? Reborn, he replied. The man scanned through the scroll before finding Michael's company on the list. I have confirmed your application, Sir Michael. Your designated spot will be on the spot J5, right between the pond and the large acacia tree. I can see here that you have just submitted your application yesterday. You have the choice to start your test within a month of your application. When would you like to take it? Michael answered, right now. The man seemed very surprised. Are you sure? Usually, applicants need a lot of time to set up their stall to transfer all their inventory inside Metropolis. I already had it delivered before. Don't worry, he said to the man. Still, the attendant was very worried for Michael. I would suggest that you use your allotted time to delay your permit test at least a week from now. Why is that? He asked. The annual Upperwood District Festival is about to start, the attendant explained. I think that you would stand to get a better chance if you let the festival pass first before you start your permit test. It would be an extreme waste for you to waste your chance because you can only apply for a permit once a year. Michael shrugged. I have no idea what the Upperwood District Festival is all about. But that doesn't matter. I want to take the test today. Seeing as Michael had no intention of ever backing out, the attendant quickly explained so that he would understand the severity of his choice. The Upperwood District Festival is an event for all of the companies located in this district. This means that this entire block will be competing for people's attention. These are companies that are already well established in Metropolis. And not to sound offensive, but your company is nothing compared to them. They don't know you or what you offer. Local customers will most probably pick companies that they already know about rather than new ones they don't know about. The attendant was trying to make Michael understand that getting a permit was an incredibly hard task. But trying to get a permit while the Upperwood District Festival was ongoing was an even more impossible task. Look around you, said the attendant. Do you see how many people are in this park right now? And do you see the stalls located all around? Did you notice that barely any of them are getting customers? Michael looked around and noticed that despite the foot traffic all around the plaza, none of them were even giving the stalls a second look. They were just passing them by as if they were nothing but stones on the grass. Stalls are barely getting any customers normally, and when the festival starts tomorrow, you'll see that none of them will even have sales above what you can count with two hands. So please heed my warning. It's still not too late for you to change your mind. You can give yourself a better chance if you just wait another week. Now for any other person, they would have simply just heeded the man's warnings. Even Michael, if it was before he reincarnated in this world, then he would have delayed his permit test for a week. But now, Michael wasn't willing to do that. There was a certain sense of pride within him that wasn't going to back away from a fight. He was confident in his ability to pass the permit test. He was confident in Reborn. And besides, if he was going to get the permit, then he would eventually be competing with those local companies anyway. If he couldn't even compete with them now, then he shouldn't even try to get a permit in the first place. Michael was just treating this as any other day. He was just going to sell his products to people who need to have their quality of life improve. The tests or the festival didn't matter. Have you changed your mind? The attendant asked. Yes, I changed my mind. I'll take the permit test tomorrow. The attendant was left standing with his jaw dropped. This boy named Michael was actively trying to compete with the local companies of the Upperwood District. This was insane. He had never met such a daring businessman. Meanwhile, Michael had already left to go find the J5 spot for tomorrow's permit test. He followed the direction given to him by the attendant, passing by the locals until he eventually found the spot that he was looking for. And coincidentally enough, he saw that there were a few stalls that were built close to him. These stalls were small, which was a clear indication of their small companies. Yet, Michael could see from first glance that their products were made with a lot of effort, labor, and love. Excuse me, this is J5 spot, right? He asked the stall owners. There were 4 of them in total. And the one that Michael spoke to was a middle-aged man with balding hair who was managing a small bakery. Are you taking the permit too? The old balding man asked. Michael nodded. Yep, I'll start tomorrow. As soon as he said that, the other 3 stall owners got out of their buildings and went over to Michael. Boy, I think that you should ask the association to delay your test. There's no need for you to waste your test like us. Take it next week. If they refuse to delay it, tell them that I harassed you. That'll probably get me kicked out, but I didn't have a chance in the festival anyway. At least you'll have a chance. Chapter 429, Upperwood Festival. Michael appreciated their concerns. One of them was even willing to sacrifice themselves just so that he could delay his permit test, which was very touching. It's okay. I chose to start my permit test tomorrow, he told them. They all looked at him as if he was crazy. No one in their right minds would start their permit test during the Upperwood Festival. But it seemed that Michael was set on his ways and there was nothing they could do to convince him otherwise. It's fine, the old balding man said. He's just a kid. There's plenty of chances for him in the future. The others agreed. It might actually be a good experience for him. He can learn from this mistake. If that's the case, then welcome to our little spot here in the market plaza. If you have anything you want to ask, then just come right over to our stall, and we'll help you out whenever we can. Us small companies should stick together, helping each other out. Then they started to introduce themselves to Michael. The old balding man who owned a bakery was named Otto. Right next to him was Rena, who was the owner of a small perfume shop outside of Metropolis. The other one was Carter, who was a shoemaker whose stall was filled with handmade leather shoes. Last but not least was Pedro, who was a metalworker who specialized in utensils like spoons and forks. Their stalls were quaint and homely, but Michael could see that their products had good quality for this day and age. If these were sold in other territories like Kingsbridge Town or Angora City, then Michael could see it become a very popular item to trade for. However, this was Metropolis. Competition here was hard. He had already seen much larger companies and stores that sold these kinds of items as he made his way towards the market plaza. In short, it was hard for them to distinguish themselves from the people. How about you, kid? What do you sell? Otto asked him. My name is Michael and I own the Reborn company, he told them. The four of them had never heard of Reborn before, probably because they were originally from territories much further north from Metropolis. What kind of things do you sell? Metalwork? Textile? Food? Michael shrugged. We sell all kinds of things. The Reborn company offers a variety of products as well as services. This garnered a bit of a worried reaction from the four stall owners. They didn't think that it was such a great idea to sell so many products in a stall. It's great to have variety, but it will be hard for you to make an identity for Reborn. Customers will have no idea what they would get from your company. I suggest that you focus on one specific niche, Carter suggested. Look at me. People know that I sell shoes. So anyone wanting to get their shoes fixed in this park will come to me. That's only if they're in a hurry, Rena retorted. But he does have a point, young Michael. My perfume store may not get a lot of customers, but I am starting to get some loyal and returning customers because they like my distinct perfume smell. How about your stall? Have you made one yet? Pedro asked. If you want, I can help you with it. As you can see from my handiwork, I'm pretty good with crafts. They all gave Michael some tips and some suggestions due only to their desire to help Michael navigate this hard permit test. After all, this was not their first time taking it, so they had a lot to tell him. Michael appreciated them, but he knew what he wanted to do and what he needed to do. I already have my items and my stall ready. But thanks anyway. The four old-timers nodded their heads. Of course, of course. You're one of us now, so we have to help you out, said Otto. Michael had some questions about them regarding the spot itself, and they eagerly marked out the J5 spot for him. Thankfully, it was quite big and would fit the mobile food truck that Michael had prepared. He also asked them for a map of the whole market plaza and without hesitation brought out their own maps to give him. This is Upperwood District, and in the middle there is the market plaza. We're right here, on the right of the pond in the center, said Rena as she gave the map to Michael. If you can see those red lines crossing all over the map, that's the usual foot traffic on the plaza. The thicker the line, the more people are visiting the place, she explained. Michael noticed that the path that crossed his and their stalls only had a very thin line, meaning that the foot traffic inside was very minimal. Don't worry though, the festival increases the number of customers that go around the park. Now, whether they buy from us is another question entirely, Pedro said, a bit self-deprecatingly. At least you guys don't have to compete with a literal sub-company of the Hephaestus conglomerate. Don't bring down the boys' enthusiasm, Pedro, Carter said. Michael, forget about those local companies and just focus on your own stall. It will just demoralize you. Michael was unfazed. Please tell me. I'd like to know who we're facing. The four stall owners looked at Michael, surprised at his fighting spirit. I'm liking you more and more, kid. Fine, I'll tell you. Do you see those buildings surrounding the entire market plaza? Michael looked at the map and saw that the entire green forest region of the Upperwood District was enclosed by these buildings sectioned off into color-coded areas. First is the company called Spice Vice, and they control this region of the district just beside the main roads. They sell all kinds of spices, herbs, and even honey. They pride themselves in selling these rare products that could only be found outside Metropolis. Michael had never heard of this company before, which probably meant that they hadn't set foot in the lower Queens region or the Kings region at all. If that was so, then the items they sold must not be that rare. Carter then moved his hand over to the next section of the map right beside the Spice Vice region. The next region is owned by a large textile company called Sweet Suits. They sell all kinds of fabrics, linen, cotton, satin, you name it, they have it. Their materials are found all over Metropolis. Did you see the chitons the association employees wear? It's from them. Michael then set his sights on the opposite side of the market plaza. This region is owned by the Pyramida Cuisine. As you can see, they're perfectly aligned with the most foot traffic in the market plaza. They're the go-to place when people want to eat after walking in the park. Of course, the restaurants that they manage in this district are the low-class ones, which unlike the really high fancy ones, can accommodate normal people. Michael wasn't surprised to hear that name. After all, Chef Castilla had already spoken to him about their restaurants in Metropolis. Chapter 430, Transferring the Mobile Stall. Michael thought that it would be a good idea to ask Chef Castilla what he knew about these restaurants in the Upperwood district. He made ChatJK4 take a mental note of it. And last but not least, this corner of the district is controlled by none other than Quench Company and led by one of the legacies. Michael remembered that Bobby owned the Quench Company, which was a sub-company of the Hephaestus conglomerate. They were one of Michael's goals for obtaining a permit. He wanted to know how to apply Su to his mithril artifact. It was good to know they were so close to him. This part of the Quench Company is managed by one of Bobby's officers, one of his generals named Dickie. They specialize in creating everyday metal objects for furniture. Their quality of work is said to be very close to dwarven quality, if you can believe that. I can't believe that, Michael muttered to himself. Anyway, those are the 4 companies that are going to be the major frontrunners for the Upperwood District Festival. But we're not competing against them. They're in a league of their own. We're competing against the other smaller local companies scattered about. They're just like us, but bigger and better. Now technically in this festival, they aren't competing against us. They're competing against themselves. We're basically just the ants that live off of their crumbs. Or to be more accurate, the big 4 companies eat to their heart's content. Then the smaller local companies eat the crumbs off their plate. And then we are the ones that eat the crumbs off of their crumbs. Hopefully we get just enough to get by and pass the permit test. With all of that explained, the 4 owners hoped that Michael would understand the hardships that they were about to face. For their permit test, they had to get 7,000 sales in a week or 1,000 sales a day. Now, during normal circumstances, this was already hard to achieve. If there were 1,000 customers that walked by their stall, they would get lucky if 100 of them even peeked through their wares. Now, the festival did increase the number of people walking through the market plaza, but the rate of their sales would actually plummet because of the increased competition from the local companies. Even now, it seemed impossible just to get 100 sales a day, let alone 1,000. Do you get it now, Michael? Otto asked. Michael nodded. I understand completely. Now, the 4 of them looked at Michael, expecting him to be worried out of his mind. Yet, the boy simply bowed his head, thanked them for their help, and went on his merry way as if he wasn't just given the worst news of his life. I'll see you all tomorrow, he said, leaving them all shocked at his optimism. Since there was still some time left till the start of tomorrow, Michael decided to transport the mobile food truck today to prepare. He transported himself back to their headquarters to see that Shiina had already arranged everything for him in a neat manner. It's been fully supplied with fuel, Lord Michael. This thing can run for 2 weeks straight with the refrigerator, the stoves, and other appliances turned on, Shiina reported. Thanks. I have also recruited some chefs to help you with the street food that you have prepared. 3 Rebornians wearing an apron and a white hat presented themselves to him, bowing. It's a pleasure to work for you, boss. Michael inspected their talents and saw that they all had A-class skills related to cooking and cuisine. They were definitely up for the job, and one could even say they were overqualified with the simple street food that they were going to make. Tony and Remy wanted to help with this too, but he told them to just focus on growing McTony's. Their restaurant had continued to grow at a commensurate rate with no signs of stopping. Without them at the helm, it could hinder their progress or stop it entirely. Using the dragon's whiskers ingredient for their McTony's recipe made them unable to store it for a long time, which meant that long-distance delivery was not possible. If it was, then he would have wanted them to join in on the permit test as well. Anyway, he was already confident with the food and the items that they were going to sell tomorrow. I'll be taking the truck with me now, he said to everyone. So without further ado, he wrapped the whole mobile food truck with his shadow and used his skill to transport the entire thing over to Metropolis. For normal people, teleporting something this large at such long distances would have been impossible for anyone not in the 8-star realm, but Michael was different. He had near limitless mana at his disposal. A large magic circle appeared in front of him, gathering all the natural mana in the environment to power such a mana-hungry spell. The disturbance caused the wind to pick up, blowing across the warehouse and causing the engineers' blueprints to fly all over the place. While the engineers struggled to keep their hard hats on their heads, Shiina just stayed still and waited for Michael to finish his spell. And once enough mana had been siphoned away, the large shadow underneath the truck suddenly bulged up into a dome, swallowing the entire vehicle into the shadows. Somewhere a few kilometers away from Metropolis walls, a large shadow emerged from the ground and turned into a dome. And in a split second, the shadows in the dome started to recess into the ground, revealing mobile food truck in perfect condition with Michael standing right beside it. Michael looked around and noticed that the mana density in the environment had gone down significantly. As expected, this kind of large-scale teleportation needs such large amounts of mana from both sides of the portal. The magic tower in Metropolis would have noticed it by now. Thankfully, I have a friend that can smooth out all the troubles with the Guild of Arcana. Inside the tall black spire piercing the heavens in Metropolis, high-leveled magicians and wizards were in a state of panic. What's happening? Why did the mana in the air decrease? Is there a calamity? Should we panic? I'm panicking. This was such an unusual event that they immediately thought of the worst possible reason to explain the lessening of mana in Metropolis. Of course, in such a calamitous state of emergency, the only person that they could talk to was none other than their tower master. All high-ranking magicians fled to the top floor of the tower, seeking the advice of their most respected leader. And as they entered their tower master's room, they saw the bespectacled short-haired old man sitting at his desk with a letter in his hands. Surely, the tower master should have noticed the weakening of mana in nature. Yet, the man didn't look like he was panicking at all. Instead, he looked at the letter in his hands with confusion in his face. Dear mystical friend, there may be an instance where mana has tragically decreased in an instant. But do not panic. There is no need to raise the alarms, as this is just something that the kid does plenty of times. I shall explain it to you at a later date. You too will understand my frustrations at the proper time. Sincerely, Cerberus Audiobooks I. Chapter 431, Start of the Permit Test. The very next day, the start of the Upperwood District Festival finally commenced. It was a weekend, so a lot of people had come out of their homes to celebrate this very joyous occasion. Even people not from the district came in droves, basically filling the streets with carriages and horses. This was because the festival brought on lots of competition within the companies in the district, allowing for lots of discounts, special limited time items, and especially cool events that everyone can participate in. The Quench Company, for example, had a 20% discount on all of their kitchen utensils for the entire duration of the festival. This was something people had been waiting for all year round, so there were lots of people already lined up in their stores even before the sun had come up. But this festival wasn't just for the companies, it was also for the people. This was the only time they could relax and unwind, celebrating the culture of Metropolis with a lot of other people. There were banners all around, with colorful triangular flags strung up high along the buildings, creating a very fun and festive mood for the people walking along the streets. The market plaza was no different. In fact, the festivities had been boosted up even more. The wooden stalls from companies on their permit test had upgraded their stores to accommodate festivities just like the ones on the street, hoping that it would attract more customers. Now, whether that worked or not was another conversation entirely. While Otto and the others had already set up their stalls early in the morning, Michael hadn't yet showed up at all. They were getting worried for the rookie, thinking that his nerves got to the best of him and he ended up quitting the permit test entirely. Of course, that was not true in the slightest. With his mobile food truck ready, Michael drove the vehicle towards the gates of the city, with the guards and other people looking at him with strange expressions. What is that? Is that made out of metal? Has a monster come over to invade? They saw this gigantic metal structure that was moving at speeds far faster than what they thought was possible. Not only that, the hum of the engine made them mistake the automobile for a large monster that had come wandering over into Metropolis. They quickly raised their weapons in the air defensively. However, as the mobile food truck rolled in closer, the soldiers was able to see humans through the glass panes. What the hell? Michael opened the door, surprising the soldiers and making them flinch away. A human boy? The soldiers slowly approached Michael. Boy, is this your tamed monster? Nope, Michael responded. This is my carriage. The soldier was immediately doubtful. But where's your horse? How is it moving such heavy material if you don't have at least 10 horses pulling the reins? Michael knew that he wouldn't be able to explain how an automobile worked in a short amount of time, so he just presented them with a letter. The soldier took the letter and saw the wax seal on the very front. His eyes widened when he realized that it had the bearings of the Guild of Arcana. Not only that, but they knew that the seal was only available to mystic masters. Cerberus Audiobooks, the soldier proclaimed. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared on top of the wax seal. This proved to them that the letter was authentic and not a counterfeit. I apologize for the delay, the soldier said. You may come in. Thanks to Cerberus' authority as a tower master, Michael was able to bypass any security inspection on the vehicle that would have taken days, if not weeks, given how complex and strange an automobile was on the inside. Thanks, he told the guards before going back inside the automobile and driving it inside the gates. As soon as the engine roared to life, the soldiers flinched once again. Once he was inside the gates, he immediately noticed the gaze of someone far away. He looked through the windshield and saw a person floating in the very top of the magic tower. He must be the tower master of Metropolis, Michael thought. Now thankfully, Cerberus had already informed this tower master that any and all inquiries on him and the Reborn company had to wait until the end of the permit test so as not to disturb him. So, as much as the tower master wanted to talk to him, the old man had to keep his distance and simply observe. And it wasn't just the tower master. The automobile immediately stole the glances of everyone in its near vicinity. Its massive size compared to a normal horse carriage in the street made it stand out even more. Whoa! Is that a metal monster? Mom, is this part of the parade for the festival? What's that name on the side of the metal, Reborn? I've never heard of that. Of course, he took advantage of all of this attention and advertised the Reborn company. This was one of the reasons why he didn't teleport the food truck directly inside Metropolis. He wanted a more dramatic entrance. Hopefully, anyone curious about the metal monster would follow the truck into the market plaza and become customers for his permit test. Entering the park, all eyes were immediately on him and the truck. They all watched as this humongous piece of metal rode through the green grass until it eventually settled into the spot near the lake. Michael parked on his spot and got out of the vehicle only to be swarmed by Otto and the rest of them. Whoa, Michael. What is this? Carter asked. Yep. It's my stall. Before they could even question him about it, the sound of metal clanking rang out from inside the automobile as the workers inside began to unfold the metal container to show the interior of the vehicle. The counter windows opened, the roof unrolled, and the 4 demi-human Rebornians greeted everyone with a warm smile. "Oh my God! That is a piece of art," Pedro complimented. He observed the metalwork inside the vehicle and was immediately blown away by the quality. "How's this even possible?" Otto asked. "Come to think of it, I never even asked you what your Reborn company is all about." "The truth is that..." Michael began to tell them all about his origins in the King's region and how he had eventually reached Angora City and wanted to expand deeper in the Queen's region. "The 450th rank? That is very impressive," Rena said, amazed. "I really think that you would have had a much greater chance of getting that permit if you had started a week later." Michael smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, he gestured for the Rebornian workers to start unloading all of their products in front of the stall. They began setting up desks and pulling out new and strange pieces of technology that no one in Metropolis had ever seen before. It was an immediate eye-catcher, if nothing else. Michael looked at all this and said, "Reborn is open for business." Chapter 432, First Day. Michael's stall had 2 different categories. One was items for everyday use in the kitchen and in everyday life. Things like pans and pots. These were basic metalwork items that were already present in this world. The other items were personal items like soaps, shampoos, and even makeup. Now usually these items were made by hand and were usually filled with imperfections and dents because if it was too perfect then the price would go up too much. However, when Otto and the others looked at the rate on these items, they were surprised that they were in the same price range as second-hand wares. The only problem was that the metalwork and quality of these items were far too good for the price. "These are way too cheap," said Pedro. "It looks like these have been made by the dwarves." Michael shrugged. "That's the normal price in our territory. Actually, I even made it a bit pricier for the stall." They couldn't believe it. They thought that for such great quality, the price had to be at least double to match the amount of work and effort that was put into the item. And that didn't even take into account the price for shipping these items. But what they didn't know was that these were all mass manufactured in his factories, so these were considered low quality in their territories. As for transporting these goods, once the Golden Road was finished, then the fee would significantly lower down. "Would you guys like to try it out?" he asked them. Otto and the others became the first test customers for the stall. The Rebornian attendants quickly went to work and began selling the items to them. "Dear customer, this is our famous Reborn soap. To see how good our product is, I will put all of this dirt and grime on my hand. And if I use this soap and a little bit of water, then voila! It's gone and my hand smells even better than a field of flowers." Rena's jaw dropped when she smelled the different colored soaps on display. Some were even better than her perfumes. They were all surprised as each and every one of Michael's products were far beyond what they had seen in the market. And some of them, like the matchsticks, were amazing innovations that they knew could change the whole landscape of the market. Otto and the others were convinced. Michael was in a whole league of his own. They would even dare say that he could compete with the best of them in Metropolis, even the legacies. "So this is the reason why you were so confident about the permit test," said Otto. "With these products, you knew you were going to pass no matter what." "I'm not ashamed to say that what I've been doing is amateurish compared to what you do," confessed Rena. "Just that automobile alone, I knew that I was outmatched." "It's a work of beauty that I have no way of understanding," said Perdo. "Everyone said it already." "You deserve that permit," Carter added. And it seems that they weren't the only ones who noticed Reborn stand out from the rest. A few customers had finally given in to their curiosity and approached the scary metal monster in the park. At first, they were just curious as to what kind of thing could move that fast despite being so heavy. But then they saw that it was actually one of the stalls from those companies that wanted to get a permit. The one that approached was a small family of 4, 2 kids and the parents. And as they approached, the Rebornian workers immediately put on their smiles and accommodated their first customer. "Welcome to the mobile Reborn store, what can I get for you?" Michael watched as the family observed the product demonstrations with wide eyes. They were immediately taken in by the dazzling display and wanted to get one for themselves. "I'll get the soap and the shampoos," said the mother. "I'll take that knife for me. Honey, it can slice a paper in half without even any pressure." "Mom, Dad, I want that matchstick. I can create fire like I'm a magician." "Me too. Me too." And within a few minutes, the satisfied family of 4 walked away from the stall having bought at least 10 items in total. They even promised to return tomorrow to buy some more, given that they only brought in a limited budget today. The day only went on to become better and better for Michael. The dramatic entrance this morning served as a huge advertisement and lured a lot of people to come and check out their wares. Anyone that came close to them ended up buying at least one item for themselves. This was one of the advantages of having a lot of items in stock. People from all walks of life had something to buy. More and more people came to check out and buy something from the stall. And a staggering 100% of the people who walked along their path of the plaza ended up garnering a sale for Michael and his stall. The items in the desks were far too alluring for them to pass up. Eventually, one of the customers smelled a delicious scent coming from the stall. They stopped looking around the desks and came closer to the stall. There, they saw the Rebornian attendants wearing aprons as they dunked something in searing hot oil, producing that mouth-watering sizzling sound. That smells good. What is that? The slightly chubby male customer asked. Hello, sir, this is our menu for today. You can pick what you like, replied the Rebornian attendant. The man looked over the menu, seeing things like pizza, donuts, and churros from the list of foods available. As for the drinks section, there was ice-cold water, beer, and even tropical fruit juices of all kinds. At first, the man was very suspicious of this. How could they even get fresh fruit in the middle of winter? And he didn't even know anything about the foods that they offered. But since the smell was good, the man decided to give it a try. Give me this donut thing, he said. All right, sir. Would you like water with that? The man shrugged. Sure. And in a few minutes, the attendant handed him a torus-shaped bread with some chocolate drizzled on the top of it. This was very appetizing to the man, and he couldn't help but take a bite out of it this very instant. And as soon as he took a bite, he was hooked. The chocolate and the bread was a combination he had never tried before. This is amazing, he praised. He ended up eating everything in a few seconds, making him crave for some water. The attendant saw this and quickly served him a cup of ice-cold water. Excuse me, miss. Can I have more of that donut? All right, sir. It will take a while to cook the donuts, so would you like to sit in one of our tables? The attendant asked as she pointed at the neatly placed tables around the grass. The man nodded and took a seat, waiting patiently for his donut. And as the day ended, Otto and the others were surprised to see that Michael had garnered over 1,000 sales in a single day. This would put him well on track to passing the permit test. Chapter 433 Results of the First Day. The Upperwood District Festival was something that continued whether it was day or night. During this 1-week period, everyone was burning the midnight oil to continue the festivities even though the sun had already set far off into the horizon. Those established businesses like the Quench Company, the Sweet Suits, the Spice Vice, and the Pyramida Cuisine had their entire building lit up with oil lamps and even some magic lights courtesy of their own magicians under their purview. That was how they continued to conduct their business well off into the night until the crack of dawn. But for Otto, Rena, Carter, Pedro, and the other companies in the market plaza trying to get their permit, they had no other choice but to rely on poorly illuminated candles. Some even chose to simply pack up and wait until the sun rose tomorrow morning. In fact, Otto and the others were even thinking the same thing. Unlike Michael, they sold next to nothing during this festival. Their pathway was already a place where not a lot of people visited. But those that visited them never even gave their wares a second look. I think we're done for tonight, said Otto. How about you, Michael? I'll keep the stall open, he replied. But how are you going to do that? Before Otto could even finish his sentence, the 4 attendants inside the mobile food truck started flipping the switches inside to reveal a bevy of small lights lined up along the railings of the truck itself. There were 2 overhead bulbs that illuminated the whole surroundings, including the desks containing his products as well as the tables reserved for those who ate their food. Everyone's eyes widened. They thought that it was magic, but they saw no sign of any magic circle that popped up around the stall. What is this? Whoa, that's pretty. I can't believe it's so bright out here in the park. Eventually, the dazzling lights lured some of the people to purposefully come out of their way and check out Michael's stall. These people weren't supposed to be traveling in this path, but the bright lights attracted them like bugs. Welcome to Reborn stall, what can we get for you? Eventually, the night wore on and the amount of people walking through the park plummeted. This officially signaled the end of the first day as there were no more customers to be found. Now, most people would usually have to pack up their products to safeguard them, but Michael chose to leave them be because he knew that there were shadow orcs surveilling the area at all times. Eventually, one of the association employees walked up to Michael and asked to tally his score. Mr. Michael, good morning. Your first day has gone well, I hope. Michael shrugged. It could have been better. Although they had done more than 1,000 sales on the first day, Michael thought that he could have had more if people visited this place more often. He was very much limited by the amount of traffic going around in the J5 area of the market plaza. All the people who walked along this path ended up buying something from him, which told him that he would have gotten so much more if he had better visibility among the general public. The sensation with the automobile did extremely well, but the fact that there was no social media in this world really hindered the rumor to spread that fast. Though, by his estimations, the amount of sales they would get on the second day would definitely increase by a lot. Hopefully, the word of mouth helped spread the name Reborn throughout the district. All in all though, Michael's situation was pretty good. He was just disappointed that it wasn't better. However, the employee took that as something bad and patted Michael's shoulders, consoling him. You can do better today. Yep. Hopefully more than 2,000 on the second day, he muttered. The employee seemed to have ignored that. Okay, I just need the special association coins from you. During this festival, every single citizen was given special coins. These coins were the currency of the festival and they were the coins that people paid to exchange for the item or service that the companies provided. And at the end of the day, these coins would be exchanged into real monetary gold coins by the association. This helped measure how many sales a company had in a single day. Please put all your coins into the special chest, said the employee as he brought out a wooden chest. It has a magic spell that helps count the pieces as well as check for any forgery for the coins. Michael used his shadow skill and dumped out all of their special association coins into the box. As the first few coins landed and formed a small mountain, a magic circle appeared in front of the chest and started a counter for everything that fell inside. The number reached the 200 mark and the employee couldn't help but nod in respect. Normally, companies were not even able to gather this much in a single day, much less the first day. Clink, 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 clink. But then the coins kept tumbling into the chest without any sign of stopping. The employees widened as he saw the counter on the chest start to go up from 200 to 500 and then to 1,000. Michael shook his hand until the very last coin had dropped into the chest, totaling 1252 association coins. What the? The employee couldn't believe what he was seeing. For him, this was just routine. He had visited almost 100 other companies today and they all showed a number below the 500 mark. And yet, this golden-haired boy was able to get 1,200 sales in a single day. He couldn't believe it. And it was only now did the employee finally look up and saw the mobile food truck in front of him. He saw the variety of items displayed on the tables, he saw the lights illuminating the interior of the stall as well as the outside. He heard the sound of sizzling food being cooked in the fryer. "What is this?" he asked. "This is Reborn, and by the way, how did we do compared to the other companies?" Michael's question seemed to have woken the employee up from his stupor. He immediately consulted his scroll and began to scan through its contents. With Reborn's score of 1,200 plus sales for today, that would put them at the very top of all the companies wanting to get a permit. They had smashed through the record. "You're in first place," the employee said. The Rebornian employees cheered and celebrated their success. "Congratulations, boss. Hee, I knew you could do it." Michael pumped his fist and celebrated with the rest of them. Meanwhile, the employee couldn't help but think to himself, how would Michael and the Reborn company compare to the local companies in the festival? The employee secretly took out a second scroll from his pockets. This was the rankings for the companies already well established in Metropolis, companies like the Quench Company, the Pyramid Cuisine, and a whole lot more. Chapter 434, Second Day. Of course, at the very top of the list was the reigning champions of last year's festival, the Quench Company. As part of the legacies, their dominance in the market was nothing that could be surmounted by others. Their total sales for the first day was 20,316. And by a very large margin, second place came to the Pyramid Cuisine. Their food and drinks were bestsellers, with no other food company coming close. Because of that, they were able to get a score of 14,294. Coming hot on their tail was the Sweet Suits, who had just released their new line of expensive silks and exotic fabrics that could only be found months of travel away from Metropolis. Their sales all in all were 12,721. And in fourth place was Spice Vice, who garnered 11,824 sales for the day. A large part of their sales came from other businesses who came to buy ingredients for their own food companies. These four were the biggest companies in the Upperwood district, but there were 50 other companies that competed in the festival. Their sales ranged from 10,000 sales to 1,000 sales. The association employee looked at the very bottom of the rankings and found the last place. At the 54th place, a barbershop company did 1,232 sales on the first day. And when he compared that to Reborn sales, he was surprised to see that they were able to break through and dethrone the last ranking. This was unprecedented. This ranking was supposed to be for veterans, for companies that were competing for real in the Metropolis landscape. Meanwhile, the permit rankings were supposed to be like a kid's version of the rankings. It didn't even mean anything. It was just a way to see which company did enough to pass the test. And yet, a company was able to break through the mold. Even without an established company in Metropolis, armed only with a mobile stall in the middle of a park, the Reborn company was able to compete with the big boys, the veterans. Even if they're only in last place, the fact that they were even able to get there was a miracle in and of itself. The employee quickly left the park lugging the chest behind him to report this to his superior, Claudia Montgomery. He bid his goodbye to Michael and went straight to the association building. He rushed through the crowd, bumping into his co-workers who questioned him why he was so impatient. "You guys are going to want to see this too," he said to them. He went to Claudia's room and barged right in without even knocking. Claudia, surprised by the rudeness, questioned the employee. "Why are you and 20 of your co-workers coming into my office so early in the morning?" The employee walked towards her desk and slammed down his scrolls and presented both to Claudia. He immediately pointed at the top of one of the lists, emphasizing Reborn's score. "Wow, first place. Let's see their score." Her eyes widened. She took the scroll and put it up against a light, trying to see better. 1,200 sales? In a single day? And now even the other employees couldn't believe what they just heard. Who? How did they do that? Every single association employee in charge of the Upperwood District Festival squeezed through the door trying to see commotion. The Reborn company, they're only positioned in J5. That's the worst space to be in. And they got 1,200 sales in a single day. Are you sure those coins are real? The employee nodded, offended. Of course. The chest verified it as real. They all knew that the chest was made by the Tower Master of Metropolis. It could not be fooled. However, the absurdity of Reborn's score made them question that rather than accept the truth so fast. Wait, Reborn company? I heard they're the ones that had that strange metal monster that they tamed. Yeah. I saw it firsthand, said the employee. It's not a monster. It's like a carriage, but made out of metal. Also, it has all these lights that wasn't made out of magic. So it was true? I heard that too and thought it was just a rumor. I heard about Reborn from a friend too. He said they sold cookware that's almost at dwarven quality level. I have been hearing some conversations about a stall in the market plaza that sells everything at cheap prices but amazing quality. It must have been Reborn. As her employees talked amongst each other, she shifted her focus over to the second scroll. They broke through this ranking? She muttered to herself. A smile started to break out on her cheeks. It seemed that her niece Yuna had chosen Reborn for a reason. If they could break through the ranking only using a mobile stall, then they had incredibly huge potential once they were established in Metropolis. For others, this was already impressive enough. But Michael wasn't satisfied. He wanted more sales. So, as the sun broke the night sky, the second day had finally commenced. Otto and the others had come up incredibly early despite only having a few hours of sleep for the day. Good morning, he greeted them. But then he noticed that they didn't bring anything with them. Last night, they left with a wagon full of their products. But now, they returned empty-handed. I sure hope you're not going to be selling air, he joked. The four of them forced a laugh. No, Michael. Us four have decided something. We're going to be quitting the permit test, Otto said. What? Rena tried to calm him down. Yesterday, we were barely able to break 100 sales. We had no chance in this festival. Yup, Pedro agreed. We'll just try our luck next year, no worries. This left a sour taste in Michael's mouth. Although he knew that this was just business, these four had been nothing but good to him despite not knowing who he was. Not only that, but he thought that their products were very good and could compete with the market Metropolis. Hey, don't feel bad, kid. We've already decided to quit the moment we found out that the festival was going to coincide with our permit test. We just decided to try out one more day to accompany you since we thought you weren't going to do well, haha. Clearly, we were wrong. Michael sighed and took a deep breath. But why are you all here? They all looked at each other. Well, since we have nothing better to do, we've decided to help out in your stall, said Otto. We all like your product, so it's easy for us to sell it to others, Rena said, pointing to the soaps and shampoos. We'll be scouring the streets and begging them to come to your stall if we have to. Even though Pedro said that as a joke, it looked like they would do it if Michael wanted. This touched Michael's heart. Even though they'd already failed and they weren't going to get anything, they still decided to show up and help him in his stall. Okay, he told them. I'll be counting on you. And so, with the four of them shouting and bringing people in, Michael found much greater success than the first day. By the end of the night, Michael had garnered a total of 2,530 sales, doubling his own score yesterday. Chapter 435, More Sales and Stall. The second day went about as smoothly as the first one. Those that came yesterday came back to buy something again. Not only that, but they brought with them some new customers who had heard about Reborn's products through word of mouth. In fact, people were now even starting to line up in his stall, waiting to be the next one to buy something from Michael. Otto, Rena, Carter, and Pedro helped the Rebornian employees manage the whole stall, preventing people from being too bored waiting. This helped Michael achieve a score of 2,530 sales for the second day. What's impressive about this was that the Special Association coins only accounted for how many people bought something from Michael's mobile stall. For example, if someone bought a matchstick, some pots and pans, and even a donut from the food truck, then that would only count as one single sale. This was the association's way to make sure that companies weren't simply just making their products extremely cheap and giving away items. They had to garner actual people to buy from them. So, if actual sales were being counted, Michael's score would be a lot higher than what was recorded. At the end of the day, Claudia was once again given a report from her employees about the rankings on the permit test. And as expected, at the very top was the Reborn company. But her focus wasn't on this list. Her focus was on the rankings that didn't include Michael and his company. She looked at the real rankings, moving her way up from the very bottom of the list all the way to the 39th spot. They were a candy company selling sweets to kids during the parade. And in total, they sold about 2,521 sales on the second day, lower than Michael's score. This is insane, she muttered. She immediately rummaged through her cabinets, looking through the different scrolls in her possession. These were all the rankings from the previous Upperwood District festivals throughout history. She wanted to see if there had been anyone in history who had ever achieved this kind of feat before. She scanned through last year's rankings, there was none. She went through year to year, going further and further back in time until finally she found a company about 10 years ago who was able to break through the rankings while only being on their permit test. And when she looked at the name of that company, she slammed her fist on the desk in excitement. The only other person who was able to achieve this feat was none other than Bobby Hephaestus, the current leader of the Quench Company and a part of the esteemed and prestigious Legacies. During their debut in the Market Plaza on the 7th day of their permit test, Bobby was able to achieve a total 3,719 sales, which would have earned him a spot in the top 25 rankings for the Upperwood District Festival. This meant that Michael was able to achieve a feat that only a Legacy was able to achieve. Claudia could only wonder how much more growth a company like Michael could achieve in the future. Could they someday be part of the Legacies? Michael's last name surely made him look the part. But the difference between them was that Michael didn't use his name nor his parents' money to achieve all of the success. He did it all on his own and from the part of the continent that others deemed extremely poor and despondent. I can't believe it, she muttered. Right now, only she and a couple of other members of the association knew about this astounding fact. But she was sure that as the festival wore on, the name of Reborn would be marked upon the hearts of not only the consumers but also the companies around the Upperwood district. After all, at the rate they were making sales, she had no doubt that Michael would pass the permit test. They could even finish it all within 5 days, with them already halfway to their goal of 7,000 sales. Meanwhile, on the very top of the magic tower, a few old men wearing crumpled top hats and weathered robes stood at the large glass window overlooking the entirety of Metropolis. Or more accurately, their eyes were set upon a single district in the distance which was currently ongoing with their festival, Upperwood District. Gentlemen, have you found out what kind of magic the boy uses to move that vehicle? One of the old men asked. No, sire. Our greatest observers have not been able to sense even a single bit of mana coming off of the structure, replied one of the wizened mages. It's either all natural or the boy created a spell that obfuscated any of our attempts at probing. To move such a large and heavy vehicle would certainly need power that only a 5-star spell could create. Surely you aren't suggesting that the boy can cast a 9-star cloaking spell. The other mages were silent. The tower master looked through the glass and saw the bright lights coming from the market plaza. Even when he used his own observation skills, he could tell that there was no kind of magic spell involved in its operation. Maybe he's a magnetic? One of the mages suggested. But they all quickly shook their heads. The boy was from the King's region, a backwoods part of the continent. He couldn't have obtained the necessary parts and processes to become a magnetic. Then there is only one probable reason. The boy is a prodigy with an extreme genius for invention. The other mages eventually agreed with this conclusion. But sire, what about the large decrease of mana the other day? Asked one of the senior mages. That was probably a prank played on me by my good friend Cerberus. Otherwise, if the boy was the cause of the great decrease, then he would have been a genius in the mystic arts unlike any of us had ever seen. If that was the case, then Cerberus would have endorsed the boy as a potential mystic master in the future. The other mages murmured amongst themselves, knowing how unlikely it was for anyone, let alone a boy, to become a potential mystic master of the Guild of Arcana. Either way, the boy is a friend of Cerberus, so we must treat him as such. Once his permit test is over, we shall send him gifts and presents to welcome him into Metropolis. As the second day came to a close, the third day started just a few hours later. Michael had come bright and early with Otto and the rest of them already up and helping the Rebornian workers set up the stall. And as the day started, Otto and the others were surprised to see that so many more people had come so early in the plaza before the stall even officially opened. They thought they already drew a huge crowd on the second day. But what they were seeing right now was already much larger than what they initially expected. They started serving everyone in the line, becoming so busy that they didn't even feel the time pass. Eventually, Michael looked at their accumulated sales for the day and saw a staggering 4,784 sales for the day. Chapter 436, Third Day. Otto and the others were extremely surprised by the amount of people that showed up to buy in Michael's stall. This whole pathway was supposed to only have 20 to 30 people coming through it, but when they looked everywhere, they realized that hundreds had gathered in a bunch around this area. Michael's products had completely broken the map. This became the hub and the center for all of the people walking through the market plaza. It wasn't just a stall that people passed through. It was a place that people actively looked for, attracting people that weren't even initially going to the park. But they couldn't blame the customers. Michael's products were all good quality. And even the exotic items that usually cost a fortune now became very much affordable. Michael had doubled his sales every single day. And it looks like the third day wouldn't disappoint. After all, they had already reached the 4,000 mark. And when added with their previous sales, they had officially reached the 7,000 sales goal for the permit test. Once he counted it correctly, Michael walked over to the gates of the park and talked to one of the association employees handing out special coins to the customers. Excuse me. The employee looked back and recognized Michael's face. It's you. You're from the Reborn company stall. Michael nodded. Do you know how much our association has been busy because of you? People have been asking for more coins from us so that they could spend it on your stall. Almost everyone in the association knew about the miracle company who garnered 2,000 plus sales in a single day. What can I help you with? The employee asked. I want you to tally my score for today, Michael said promptly. The employee looked at him weirdly. What do you mean? I have enough coins to pass the test. The employee almost scoffed in Michael's face, thinking that it was a joke. But seeing the serious look on the golden-haired boy's face, the employee couldn't help but shake his head in denial. Can you say that again? You passed the test? You mean to tell me that you already got 7,000 sales? Michael nodded. The employee was stunned for a second, not knowing how to react. He was stuck in a juxtaposition between disbelief and thinking that this was a prank. I have the coins with me. Can you count it? Michael asked. Still stunned, the employee eventually managed to drag out the magical chest from under the wooden desk and present it to Michael. He verified first that the counter said 0 before gesturing to Michael to dump all of his coins inside. Clink-tink click-tink. The coins fell through the shadow box in Michael's palms with the counter in the chest slowly rising. When it reached 1,000, the employee remained steadfast. And when it reached beyond 2,000 coins, the man started to stare at the chest with wide-eyed disbelief. He already thought this was mighty impressive, but the coins just didn't stop falling. The number kept rising to 3,000 and eventually landed on the final number, 4,784 coins. The employee had to sit back down in his chair to digest this information. He then picked up the scroll in the desk and looked at the current tally that the Reborn company had. With the new tally of scores added, they far surpassed the 7,000 mark needed to pass the test. You have won the permit, the employee said, still in disbelief. This young, golden-haired boy was able to achieve the permit within 3 days. Somehow, Michael was able to double his sales every single day that he was open. And by the third, he had achieved his goal 4 days early. He couldn't even believe that this was true. If this was any other circumstance, then the employee would have immediately doubted the results. This was far too exaggerated of a score for someone to achieve during their permit test. But he only had to look in the distance to see the truth. In the middle of the market plaza within the greenery and vegetation of the park, there was currently a large group of people gathering inside one particular spot, J5. This was what made the whole thing even more absurd. The day hadn't even ended yet. It was still midday with the sun still clearly at its zenith. Yet, Michael was already able to get the 4,000 sales that he needed to pass the test. This meant that in all likelihood he would double his current sales by the end of the day, making his total above 8,000 sales. This is a dream. The employee ended up fainting in his chair due to pure shock. Meanwhile, in the association headquarters, Claudia Montgomery heard the sound of hurried footsteps echoing throughout their marble floors. She would have got up to her feet to scold this troublemaker for disturbing her while she arranged some paperwork. But as she left her seat, the door to her room suddenly burst wide open. Again with the no knocking? When will you people ever learn? The employee ignored her and tried to catch his breath. It looked like he had sprinted through an entire mountain to get here. HAA. Eventually, the employee was able to utter 2 words. Look, Reborn. Claudia got up from her desk and took the scroll from her employee's hand. Claudia Montgomery raced through the streets of Metropolis, armed with nothing but her horse and her fiery face. She wanted to see it for herself. She wanted to see how the Reborn company was able to get more than 7,000 sales within 2.5 days of operation. Entering the market plaza, she immediately noticed the large gathering of people in the J5 spot. There were so many people that she couldn't even see the large pond that was right next to Michael's stall. Riding her horse, she parted the crowd. Once they saw her white toga, they knew that she was an employee of the association and promptly gave her the space she needed. Eventually, she saw it, the mobile stall. She saw the rows and rows of tables presented in front of the truck, each one showing different kinds of products that she had never seen before. On the stall itself, there were demi-humans serving some smoking hot wheel-shaped food towards their customers who ate their orders at the designated tables beside the truck. And the one happily manning the counters was none other than the golden-haired boy. She got off her horse and approached Michael. You rascal. You did it in only 3 days? She asked him, shaking her head. 2.5, he corrected her. Claudia let out a chuckle. The more she knew about Michael, the more she understood what her niece saw in him. The boy broke all kinds of expectations constantly. And when you think they've finished surprising people, then he would come up with another surprise in his pockets. She then took out a large red coin from her pockets. It was the size of an adult's palms, which couldn't even fit inside of Michael's hands. Here. You earned it, she said, handing the permit to Michael. Michael took the permit in his hands and nodded. Chapter 437, Permit Acquired. Michael looked at the red coin in his hands. It had the symbol of the association stamped on it, which was a weighing scale in the middle with laurels surrounding both sides. He could tell that this wasn't made out of anything special. It didn't even have any special security measures to prevent any kind of forgery. This was because the permit coin was merely a formality. Michael and the Reborn company was now in the logbooks of history inside the association walls. That was enough to certify his permit. Anyone that tried to fake the coin would not be able to fake the paperwork created by the association. Now, Michael could establish his company inside Metropolis. He didn't even have to present his coin, as the association themselves would verify this fact for him. Neat, thanks Claudia, he said as he started walking away. Wait. That's it? No celebrations, no nothing? Claudia was exasperated at Michael's nonchalant reaction at getting his permit. It didn't even look like he just broke the record for the fastest permit in the history of Metropolis. She would have expected more fanfare from him, but instead he treated it as a nice little achievement that didn't mean anything. It's nice, but it's just the start of my journey here. It's just a step in the right direction. And now that I've overcome this step, the next thing I need to do is go over the next one. She didn't expect Michael to be so level-headed despite such an achievement. Most people she knew would brag about this and let it go over their heads, but it seemed Michael was too smart for that. But still, she would have wanted to see at least a little bit of a celebration from Michael. Fine. What are you planning on doing next? She asked, sighing. He looked at the coin in his hands. Now that I have the permit, this means that I can interact with the other companies in Metropolis, right? She nodded. Yes. You can now cooperate with them on a professional level. You'll no longer be a customer, but a peer. This was what Michael needed to finally go over to Bobby's company and find out how they coded Sue to a mithril relic. To be honest, the reason why Michael wasn't excited about his achievement like Claudia wanted was because his original goal wasn't the permit but the SU application. So unless he was able to use the 4 drops of SU he had at his disposal, then he couldn't yet celebrate at all. "If you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to be," he said to Claudia, walking away from his own stall. He let his own employees take charge of the stall. And thanks to Otto and the others, he didn't have to worry about them being too overwhelmed by all of the customers wanting to buy something. Michael quickly left, fading off into the distance. Claudia was left in the stall, still reeling from the events of today. Eventually, she walked over to one of the Rebornian employees and took out a coin from her pocket. "Hello, I would like to get one of those donuts, please, and also..." With his permit in hand, Michael sped through the market plaza until he finally reached the end of the park. Using the map that Otto gave him a couple of days ago, he found himself at the northeast side of the Upperwood district. There, he saw a large metal building with multiple thin chimneys jutting out from the triangular roof. There was steam constantly billowing out of these vents, evidenced by all the smithing that was being done inside. At the very front of the building was the name, Quencha. For large companies, especially ones that were part of the legacies, their territories were usually split up into different parts. There was a headquarters where the main leader and owner of the company resided. Usually, this building didn't have any capacity for producing products and was usually only meant as an office building. These headquarters were usually located in the middle of their territory. And surrounding this headquarters were different branches of the buildings that handled all the production and marketing of their products. These were owned and managed by their owner's senior officers. And in this case, this particular building was owned by one of Bobby's senior officers named Dickie. According to what Michael heard from others, Dickie was the 4th in command for the entire Quench company, and he handled the branch that dealt with creating everyday metal objects and furniture. This was currently the best-selling company in the entire district, evidenced by the large number of people coming in and out of their building. Unlike the situation back in the market plaza, the crowd here was very organized thanks to the multiple employees directing foot traffic. They practically owned the entire street. They had different iterations of stores in this large building. One was a store meant solely for spoons, one meant for bread knives, and many others more. This was how they managed more than 20,000 sales in a single day. Michael eventually walked inside, with one of the attendants approaching him. "Hello, sir. Welcome to Quench Company. What can I do for you?" she asked him. "I'd like to talk to your boss, Bobby." The attendant pursed her lips. "I'm sorry, but that would not be possible, little sir. The great Bobby Hephaestus is a busy man and is currently engaged in some other matter." "How about Dickie?" The attendant shook her head. "I'm sorry, but Sir Dickie cannot be disturbed unless there is official business. However, we can offer you some merchandise with Sir Dickie's signature printed on it." "I should have been more clear," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm here to talk business with him." He presented her with the giant red coin stamped with the association's emblem. The attendant's posture immediately changed. The appearance of this permit meant that she could no longer treat Michael as a little boy but as an esteemed owner of a company in Metropolis. "Forgive my rudeness. I shall relay your request immediately." The attendant quickly scurried off back into the building, whispering to her other co-workers about what transpired. A couple of minutes later, she came back with a much more odd look on her face as she bowed at Michael. "We have verified your permit, Sir Michael. Sir Dickie would like to ask if this business involves the Reborn company." Michael shook his head. "It's more personal." She nodded. "I understand. If you would please follow me, I shall lead you towards Sir Dickie's office." Michael followed her in, entering the Quench store and seeing all the metalware they had in store. She led them towards the employee door out to the interior of their building and up towards 5 full flights of stairs. Eventually, they reached the top floor. She knocked twice on the double door before the guards opened it from the inside. "Sir Dickie is waiting for you inside," she said, gesturing for him to enter. Michael gave her a nod of thanks and entered Dickie's main office room. Chapter 438, Dickie. Dickie's room was a large penthouse that looked like a museum that housed preserved armor from the Middle Ages. Everywhere Michael looked, there were all kinds of armor paraphernalia either attached to the wall or encased in a glass box. He noticed that the quality of these builds were much greater than the cookware being sold below. Once he observed it closer, he noticed that these were dwarven-made. "Do you like my collection? I scour the black markets in search of these amazing pieces of art." Dickie appeared coming back from his balcony. The man had tan skin and a hairy chest, which was very visible from his simple black tunic shirt that he wore. He bore a close resemblance to Bobby, which probably meant that they were related. "Are you Dickie?" Michael asked. "Yes, I am." "And you are Michael. I must confess that I have only heard of your name just this moment when you requested to meet me." Michael shrugged. "I didn't know about you until a couple of days ago too." "Ha ha ha ha. I like you." Dickie laughed. "Please sit." He gestured for Michael to sit at the leather couch in the middle of the room while he sat at the very opposite chair. "You are very surprising, Sir Michael. From what I've heard from the association, you achieved your permit only 3 days into your test. Nobody has even done that before, not even Bobby." "Thank you," Michael received the compliment. "The more that I have heard about your company, the more that I was impressed. They say that you tamed a metal monster and used it as your ride. Is that true?" Michael told him the truth. "No. It's a metal carriage." "Ah." Dickie clapped. Then it is even more impressive that you were able to create such a wondrous machine like that. It's such a work of art that I would like to buy one for myself. In the future, maybe. I'm planning on selling it to the general public once I have established myself in Metropolis. Dickie looked absolutely thrilled to hear that news. It is deserving of being in a museum just like the dwarven equipment that I have collected. It looked like Dickie thought it was an interesting piece of machine but didn't think much about its real purpose. After all, he had yet to see it move at its real speed. He just assumed it moved slow like a turtle. Anyway, I would like to buy one in the future when it is available. Sure. Michael found Dickie to be a pleasant person to be with. He reminded Michael of those anime figurine collectors back in his previous world. Their personality may seem as weird, but it only stemmed from their love of collections. You have fulfilled my request, it's time for me to fulfill yours. Why did you want to meet me? Michael said his request straightforwardly. I want to meet with Bobby and discuss a business proposition with him. Now, his plan was to ask Bobby about the secret formula they had for coating a mithril relic with Sue. He knew that it was proprietary, which meant that they wouldn't just give it to him out of the blue. So, he thought that he could buy the information from them, or at the very least, have them help him coat his own mithril artifact with Sue. He was ready to give out tens of millions of coins for it. Unfortunately, that is not possible. You cannot discuss any business matters with my cousin, Dickie said disappointedly. Michael frowned. Why not? I'm sure you know, but the Quench Company is one of the top leading businesses in Metropolis. And Bobby himself is part of the legacies. People of their stature cannot conduct business with companies of a lower stature than their own. And no offense, but your Reborn company has still yet to prove themselves in the real market of Metropolis. You may talk with Bobby, but you cannot conduct business with him. It is forbidden not just by us but the association itself. Michael almost couldn't believe what he heard. I can't talk with Bobby? As yourself and Bobby, both of you can talk. But the companies Reborn and Quench cannot, in any way, conduct business with each other. It is unfair for you. Only those that are closer in ranking can conduct business with each other. In fact, I cannot even interact with you on a business level. It is only when I found out that your matter is personal that I allowed you inside. Michael couldn't understand that. He didn't know that there was such a strict hierarchy in Metropolis, so much so that one cannot be in business with another unless they were of the same rank. It sounded classist and elitist. Why not? Is it just because they deem those lower to them as inferior? Dickie immediately waved his hands. No such thing. But in order to be fair for smaller companies like you, this kind of law is in place. Still, it didn't make sense for Michael. Why would it hurt the smaller company by being in business with the larger company? By logic, it would only help the smaller company since they would be brought up by the larger company. Are you from the King's region? Asked Dickie as if realizing something. Yeah. I see. You do not know about the customs of dueling, Dickie said, scratching his chest. Dueling? Yes, dueling. It is when two consenting parties fight in a fair duel, either to settle differences, to divide loot, or to simply increase in ranking. There are tens of thousands of companies in the Queen's region alone. Because of that, there are frequent disagreements and fights regarding territory and other such mundane possessions. Back in the old days, there were no rules regarding this. Everyone could take what they wanted as long as they defeated the other party. It was a lawless world with a lot of wars. But of course, this created a lot of chaos. Millions were killed, most innocent civilians. Humanity almost doomed themselves to extinction. But thankfully, Zir Montgomery was able to unite all the continents in the world and had them agree to the rule of dueling. No more senseless fighting. No more wars killing civilians. When two companies wanted to settle their differences, then they only had to involve themselves. That was the rule of dueling. If someone broke this rule, then they could be subject to a coalition from the rest of the companies, just like what happened with Flarecorp. They conquered Batroc Town without dueling with the Duke that owned it. Civilians were killed. Because of that, a coalition of all the legacies formed to stop them. Michael absorbed the information and started to understand why there was a rule against a larger company being in business with a smaller company. The larger company presumably had a much stronger force than the smaller company. And in a duel, the victor was clear. Are there any limits to the duel? Michael asked. Usually, a duel could involve the entire company if they wanted to. An all-out war. But the Montgomerys usually prevent that in fear of mass destruction. So for everyday duels, usually only the leaders of the company and their officers are involved in it. Chapter 439, What is a duel? The presence of the duel prevented smaller companies from interacting with larger companies. But at the same time, it was what also saved them from being steamrolled into extinction. What can you bet in a duel? Michael asked. It is not technically a bet, Dickie explained. For example, when two companies discover a land for themselves at the same time and there is no clear winner between the two, then they commence a duel between them to settle who will obtain this land. For fairness, they enlist the help of a diplomat from the Montgomery family. They will ensure that the duel will be fair and that the conditions of the battle will be fulfilled. The deed/ownership of the land will be transferred over to the diplomat for safekeeping. And once the duel is over, the diplomat will hand over the deed to the winner. Since Zir Montgomery was the person who started this whole dueling thing, it made sense why she and the rest of her family were called upon to arbitrate the battle. You do not have a duel to gain something from someone. It's to decide which one had the right ownership to whatever they were fighting about. At least, that's the original intention of the duel. However, there are some instances where people use the duel in order to obtain or to conquer something that was already possessed by someone else. It can be a territory, it can be resources, it can be a single piece of treasure. However, a duel must have consent from both parties. One cannot simply force another company to have a duel. Both must agree upon the terms of the duel before it starts. Dickie's explanation for the duel made it sound very professional and well-regulated. But of course, he knew that there would be inevitable instances where the rules were not abided. What happens if someone breaks the rules of a duel? What if they don't accept their defeat after it? Dickie knew where Michael was going with this. He wanted to ask who was responsible for enforcing the rules of a duel. Like I said, the Montgomerys arbitrate duels and make sure that they are legal. Those that fail to observe the rules are no longer protected by it. They will be fair game, just like what happened with Flare Corp. They broke the rules, so it made it possible for us and the other legacies to form a temporary alliance to defeat him and divide the loot to ourselves. In short, those that fail to observe the rules of a duel would suffer the same fate they inflicted upon others. If they didn't make the fight fair, others won't make it fair for them. It was a pretty good system where everyone held themselves accountable. Knowing about duels also made him respect the Montgomery name even more than before. He never knew that their matriarch and Una's grandmother, Zir Montgomery, basically took charge of the whole world and forced them to live under the rule of dueling. It was kind of badass. You said earlier that Montgomerys preserve the rules of the duel. What if they break it? Dickie chuckled as he poured another drink for himself. They can't. Zir Montgomery forced her entire bloodline to abide by her rules. They physically or magically can't break it. That bond is so secure that their entire lineage was trusted by everyone around the world to manage duels fairly. There was just one thing that Michael still didn't understand. According to Claudia, some Montgomerys choose a company to side with, just like how Una chose to be with Reborn. But if they were going to be arbiters, then siding with a company completely broke the rule of neutrality. Can a Montgomery help companies, or are they not allowed? Dickie was surprised that Michael knew about another side of the Montgomerys. See, there are two kinds of Montgomerys. One side are the ones who keep themselves completely neutral. They make sure not to mingle with the outside world in order to keep themselves without bias. But there is another kind of Montgomery. These are the ones that actively side with a company that they deem worthy to support. Why? The answer to that is complicated. Some just want to support a company because they believe in it, some do it for the money, and some do it for the power and influence that came with it. However, they are still bound by the rules of a Montgomery. They have to follow the rules. Michael nodded his head, slowly starting to understand the world. What's the benefit of employing a Montgomery? Many people hire Montgomerys because they are masters of negotiation, Dickie answered. During the preparation stages of a duel, both parties have to agree on what they will win or what they will lose. Of course, some of these prizes are valued subjectively. One party might deem it as a treasure while the other party deems it as trash. If you have a Montgomery by your side, then they can negotiate the terms of the deal much better than normal people. They can make it so that their client only loses a small amount when they lose the duel, or they can ask for more than what they should receive. Michael finally realized that the Montgomerys were like the lawyers of this world. It's up to them whether you win big or you lose little. But of course, those Montgomerys are very hard to hire. They're very picky. We were only able to hire them temporarily. Many companies though hope to get one on retainer, meaning they'd have a Montgomery represent them in all legal duel proceedings, which is a dream for all companies. All of this made him think of Una and how he'd been taking her expertise as a diplomat and as a Montgomery for granted. He was truly lucky that he met her in the King's region and had her still following him to this day. It also contextualized why Claudia was so pressed about Michael when they first met. As it turned out, he accidentally hired Una on retainer. She wasn't just a Montgomery but the rumored heiress of Zir herself. She could have been hired by a conglomerate or be Zir's replacement as a world leader. Yet now her fate was intertwined with a small company from the King's region called Reborn. He understood why Claudia went so hard on him when they first met. Now do you understand why you can't conduct business with us? Dickie asked. Michael understood clearly. However, he wasn't about to give up. I can't conduct business with the Quench Company, but I can conduct business with an individual in the Quench Company. Dickie stopped sipping on his wine. He looked at Michael, who had a cheeky smile on his face. Haha, that's correct. Where are you going with this? According to what he knew, all descendants of the Hephaestus family inherited the formula for coding a mithril relic with Su. That meant that even the weakest among them knew how to do so, at least someone that was on the same level as him. Can I challenge a Hephaestus from your company? Chapter 440, Raren, up for a duel. Dickie looked at Michael's face and saw bold confidence in his eyes. After everything that they just talked about, the boy was still hell-bent on trying to conduct his business. It was admirable. Ha ha. You're one of a kind, Michael. And since I admire your confidence, I will play along with your hypothetical. With the Reborn company still at its infancy, you are not qualified to deal with any one of us. However, the feats that you achieved during your permit test is enough for you to be able to graze the ceiling of one of my subordinates. His name is Chucky. And although he is not talented enough for a managerial position for me, he is still quite strong enough to be an employee for my department. He's a janitor. But he's a Hephaestus just like you wanted. Michael immediately nodded. Can you arrange a duel between us? Dickie raised his hand to stop Michael's excitement. Wait a minute, hot stallion. I must warn you that despite being only good as a janitor, he is quite a skilled fighter within our ranks. In fact, if he weren't so useless in a desk job, he would have gotten my job instead. I'm fine with that, Michael replied. Dickie took a deep breath and looked at Michael. He kept opening and closing his mouth as if hesitating to say something. There was one aspect about Chucky that was important to know about in a duel. However, this particular trait was something that was kept a secret from ordinary people. What was it? It was none other than the fact that Chucky was a magnetic. Having a diva was a well-kept secret that was especially kept away from civilians and ordinary people. Dickie couldn't reveal that Chucky was a magnetic. However, it wouldn't be fair to Michael because he wouldn't know what he was getting into. It wouldn't be a fair game for a magnetic to go against someone only armed with magic spells. He wanted to relay all of this to Michael, but he simply couldn't reveal the existence of a diva to him. Please reconsider this, Michael. Chucky is not someone that a normal person can defeat. But all of his attempts seemed to be slapped away by Michael's insistence. I'm okay with that. I'm pretty strong myself. Dickie sighed. If this is what you really want, then I can't stop you. Great. How does a duel start? First, we have to ask a Montgomery to supervise the whole proceedings. If we send a letter to their estate, then we can get a diplomat here in about a week, Dickie replied, still thinking that Michael would rethink his decisions at a later date. Of course, Michael couldn't wait that long. Can't we just ask someone like Claudia to oversee this? This almost made Dickie laugh out loud. Claudia Montgomery? You want to ask her to supervise the duel? Don't you know she's the manager of the entire Metropolis Association? It was akin to using a sword to cut a paper. This duel was far too unimportant in the grand scheme of things for her to care about. Wait here. I'll go ask her, said Michael as he quickly left the room, leaving Dickie completely speechless. And about 20 minutes later, someone knocked on Dickie's door. He got up and answered it himself, seeing Michael back again. Not only that, but the person beside him was none other than Claudia Montgomery herself. CC Claudia? Claudia ignored Dickie and glared at Michael. I had more important things to do, you know? What other things? Didn't I shorten your work by completing my permit test early? As the two bantered, Dickie was left speechless in his own home. It was only when Claudia asked permission to go in did he finally realize that this was not a dream. Are you really going to supervise the duel? Dickie asked, still in disbelief. Yeah, Claudia said exasperatingly. He promised to give out a box of ballpoint pens to my building, so I had to. That was the truth. But Claudia was also personally curious about Michael's duel. He proved himself to be a great businessman. But can he prove to be a great fighter? Claudia wanted to know because dueling was a major part in growing a company. If he didn't have what it takes, then this would be the limit for Reborn. Michael, I don't know how you convinced her, but good job. Having her supervise the duel is an assurance for both of us, Dickie said, patting Michael's back. Now that they had an arbiter, they could start the negotiations of the duel. Dickie asked for the main fighter to arrive. And surprisingly, Chucky looked exactly the same as Dickie, except he was a lot taller and a lot more buff. He looked like an evolved version of Dickie. Yo bro, what do I gotta do? Asked Chucky. This here's Michael. And he wants to have a duel with you? Are you fine with that? Chucky immediately agreed. I'm always up for a challenge. Hey little bro. I'm not going to be pulling any punches, so I hope you're ready. The large man came over to Michael and asked for a high five, which Michael promptly delivered. Chucky was just a lovable goofball. First of all, I would like to ask everyone in this room a vow of silence. Everything that happens in our discussion as well as in the duel will remain only for us and us only, said Dickie. This was standard procedure, especially since Dickie thought Michael had no idea about magnetics and diva. Michael had no problem with secrecy, so he nodded along. Chucky, of course, agreed as well. With all parties in agreement, Claudia recognized the vow of silence. Now, let's get down to business. Michael, I want to know why you wanted to duel with us anyway. What do you want to achieve? I want to know how to use my Sue. Dickie nodded along. I see. You want to use your Sue. Well, like I said, is such a thing really important for you that you want to fight someone like Chucky? Wait. Say that again. Michael repeated his words with a shrug. I want to apply my Sue to my mithril artifact. What? Dickie shouted, toppling the glass of wine in his hands and onto the carpet below. Sue? You know about Sue? Even Claudia eyed Michael with disbelief. It was already unbelievable enough that he was a magnetic. But he was also in possession of the spirit of old? She knew very well that the Vanderbilt family had no help in that. It meant that he achieved all of that alone. Yeah, I know about it. I need to know how to use it on my weapon, and you're the only ones who knows how to do it, correct? Yes, the formula has been passed down to us in the Hephaestus line. Do you really have a diva? Dickie still couldn't get over that fact. It finally made sense why Michael was so confident getting into the duel. Meanwhile, Chucky seemed even more fired up for the duel. He looked at Michael with wide, excited eyes. You have a diva? This is even more exciting than before. I can't wait to fight you. Chapter 441, Details of the Duel. Michael understood why they were all doubtful about his diva. After all, they thought that the only way that a person could become a magnetic was through surgery. And if someone recently became a magnetic, then it would have been gossiped around in Metropolis. Not only that, but he was from the King's region, which people considered as the backwoods part of the continent. This was probably because the concept of dueling wasn't widely used in that area, making them seem barbaric and ancient. To ease their worries, he closed his eyes and summoned his diva. The appearance of robotic hands hovered above his stature. The right hand was complete, up to the shoulders, while the left hand was only a single hand. They all gasped, with Chucky just clapping his hands in amazement. They had never seen this kind of diva before, as it looked like it was made out of metal that was alive. The lights that pulsated around the veins of the arms reminded them of the lights from Michael's mobile truck stall. This diva definitively proved that Michael was a magnetic. Claudia couldn't help but look at Michael in a different light. The boy that she thought stole the heart of her niece ended up becoming a man with a terrific business acumen. And now he changed again to become a veritable lion with his own set of fangs. She could no longer treat him and his company as inferior. With Michael's business and his power, there was a chance for him to sim through the ranks of Metropolis. She looked at him, subtly giving him a nod of approval. "Michael, you have proved your competence to go ahead in this duel," Claudia announced. "Dickie, does this prove that the two of them are of equal power?" Dickie observed Michael's diva and saw that it was no longer a diva that was just a little seedling yet to burst through the soil. It was already a plant with its own roots. You're in the third stage of body formation?" Dickie shouted. It was one thing for Michael to be a magnetic, but it was a completely other thing for him to already be in the third stage while barely in his teens. He knew just how hard it was to obtain a God-forged piece in the wild. He and Chucky only obtained their own pieces through inheritance. But presumably Michael didn't have the same privilege as they had, meaning that he had simply stumbled upon them naturally. And somehow he was lucky enough to obtain enough pieces to grow into the third stage. That was absurd to think about. "Amazing," Chucky praised. "You're also in the third stage. Our battle will be legendary." Dickie patted his brother's shoulder. "Yes, Miss Claudia. My brother here is also in the third stage of body formation. They are equal in cultivation." This meant that they had a right to duel. Michael was the owner of a company that has yet to prove themselves in Metropolis. Meanwhile, Chucky was a janitor from one of the greatest companies in Metropolis. Those two evened out, especially in terms of magnetic power. "The next step is for you to discuss the terms of your agreement. What do you want to achieve in this duel?" Claudia asked Michael. "I want to learn the method to Kotsu," he said plainly. Dickie scratched his hairy chest as he thought about Michael's proposal. "Normally, the method to Kotsu is a secret that we keep to our graves. Even when people hire us to coat their mithril relics, we do not let them watch the process. The only way that we can reveal is through one specific circumstance, through a duel. But for us to accept this duel, what can we get in return?" Claudia looked at Michael. "You have to present something of equal value to them." Before Michael could answer, Dickie gave him a solid piece of advice. "But I have to warn you. You do not have to give something extremely precious to you. That's because even if you obtain the secret method to Kotsu, you will not be able to use it yourself. That is because the method is made only for our Hephaestus lineage. There are people throughout history who have figured out how to modify the method for them to use, but I do not think that you have that kind of expertise. I'm just saying that this may not be as valuable to you as you might think." Michael appreciated Dickie for being honest. The man could have held his tongue and let Michael believe that he could use the formula once he learned it, thereby increasing its value. But he devalued it instead by telling the truth, which only helped Michael. "I'm okay with that," Michael replied. "And I am willing to bet 100 kilograms of Damascus steel." Everyone looked at Michael like he was crazy. Even Chucky, who had been patiently waiting for the fight to start, couldn't help but express his shock at the item Michael just put up. "Damascus steel? Something that only dwarves can make. Bro, Dickie? Aren't you collecting those for yourself?" Dickie was frozen in place, unable to mutter a reply. If someone were to look all around his room, many would immediately notice his obsession with dwarven relics. He had been collecting them even when he was a child, spending millions of his own money in black markets to obtain just a single piece of memorabilia. And in all years of collecting, he was barely even able to get 50 kilograms of Damascus steel. Yet now, Michael was offering double that as a bet. "Michael, that's an extremely valuable item," Claudia said, with a look of concern in her eyes. "I'm not doubting you, but..." Before she could even finish her words, Michael used his shadow skill and dropped a large block of Damascus steel into the ground with a loud thud. This came directly from their forge in the nation of Reborn and weighed 50 kilograms in total. "I'll get the other 50 kilos. "That's fine. We believe you." Dickie stopped him. He didn't know how to feel about Michael just casually bringing an entire block of one of the most treasured metals in the world like it was nothing. Dickie didn't want to see the Damascus steel in front of him. He didn't want to build up his own expectations and get let down if Chucky lost the duel. Claudia took a deep breath as she tried to compose herself. But how could she act professional when Michael kept dropping surprise after surprise? "Ahem, anyway, are the two of you in agreement about the duel?" Michael nodded. "I think that the Damascus steel is far too valuable for this duel, but it's your choice." "We agree," said Dickie. Once the negotiations were over, Claudia took out 2 sets of papers and set it down in front of both parties. She seemed to have magically written down the details of the duel, including the prize for the winner. "Look over the contract and sign your name at the bottom. Once you have done so, the duel will officially be set." Chucky didn't spend much time reading and simply just signed his name on the dotted line. Michael looked over the contract, with ChatJK4 confirming to him that it looked solid. He then signed his name at the bottom, making the duel official. Chapter 442, Charging Up. Once the duel was official, they relocated to a remote training facility managed by the association themselves in order to accommodate duels between the companies in Metropolis. It was located just a few kilometers away, with the whole facility located inside a crater hidden away in the forest. This is an arena, Claudia said as she got off her horse. As you can see, there's not much inside it, just circular empty space. But that's on purpose because we create an entirely new arena each duel that we arbitrate. A lot of magnetics are very secretive about their abilities, so they make sure that they fight on an entirely new ground. It made sense though, as each ability had their own specific circumstances for activation. And if people knew about the other person's ability ahead of time, then they could plan ahead and easily counter their strengths. For example, if Michael knew that Blazelle's exploding ability only worked through touch, then he would have planned ahead by making sure she couldn't touch a lot of objects to make them explode. This was perhaps why most duels required a vow of silence from each competitor. And even without it, magnetics had a code of honor amongst each other about keeping each other's abilities a secret. Normal duel rules apply. There are only two ways for a person to win. One is for the other person to surrender or knock them unconscious. Once there is a fatal wound, I will exercise my right to stop the fight and administer first aid. The fight is over. She looked at both of them to see if they understood the rules. Once you are ready, take your places down at the arena, Claudia said. Michael and Chucky both floated down towards the flat crater that was recessed about 5 meters underground. They faced each other on opposite sides. Chucky took out an axe from his back, wielding it in both hands. It glowed with a yellowish-brown light, showing it to be a mithril relic. The blade itself looked like it had been dipped in oil, seeing as it looked extremely shiny. That was a code of Sue. To make the fight fair, I will not use my mithril relic, Chucky proclaimed, staking the pointed end of his axe on the ground. Michael refused the gesture. Use your weapon, he insisted. Dicky then shouted warnings at Michael from up above the arena. Michael, Chucky has coated his axe with Sue 3 times. It is not fair to fight someone that hasn't coated their mithril relic with Sue, much less someone who doesn't have it at all. Even Claudia advised Michael to accept Chucky's handicap. There is no shame in that. In their minds, Chucky had the overwhelming advantage against Michael. Such was the nature of mithril relics coated with Sue. Chucky would be able to use his ability freely while Michael would be unable to use it all. But of course, they thought wrong. Don't worry, I have my own weapon. Michael took out the drone from his pocket, unfolding its wings and letting it stay idle in his hands. A look of confusion washed over their faces as they stared at the box in Michael's hands. They had no idea what it was. That's a weapon? Chucky asked, observing the drone. But no matter how he looked, it didn't resemble any weapon at all. After all, the only sharp blades in it were the small wheel-like things on its sides. Chucky thought that it was instead something you bludgeon with, but it didn't look heavy at all. Are you sure you don't want me to forego my weapon? Michael nodded. It wouldn't be fair for you. Claudia couldn't understand Michael's logic. However, that confident look on his face was something that could not be disregarded. She had been disproven far too many times to doubt Michael now. All right. If that's what you want, then let us start the duel. In 3, 2, 1, fight. Chucky rushed towards Michael, dragging his axe behind him and creating a cloud of dust behind him. I'm not going to go easy on you. Above his head, the image of a large bull's head appeared. It looked like it was made entirely out of bronze, with horns in its head curving to a point in the middle. The power of the Godforge piece rumbled in Chucky's heart, allowing him to summon the power of his ability from deep within. Charge! Chucky shouted, with the bull above his head roaring silently, releasing steam from its ears. He raised his axe above his head and swung it towards Michael. Michael jumped away easily, with Chucky's axe hitting the ground, with its blade being embedded just a few inches deep. That was a weak swing, Michael thought. For someone as large and as strong as Chucky, he would have thought it would be a lot stronger. Haha! I'll charge at you again, Chucky proclaimed, taking the axe out of the ground and lunging at Michael. Chucky dragged the axe in the ground, swinging it up as he got close to Michael. Michael stepped backwards, feeling the wind brush through his face. Chucky realigned his axe and swung it from the side, missing Michael by a wide margin. But he didn't stop. He swung his axe again, aiming for his ribs. Chucky swung using both of his hands, with the momentum allowing him to twist his body and twirl towards Michael. Feeling the pressure, Michael jumped up and used air mana to propel himself faster. Knowing that he missed again, Chucky slowly stopped turning and planted both of his feet firmly on the ground. He looked up at Michael, who was floating in the air. Ha 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 ha. I'll charge at you no matter where you go. Chucky swung his axe continuously in a circle before finding the perfect timing to thrust it towards Michael. The momentum somehow carried him forward, letting him fly towards Michael like a torpedo. This time, Michael noticed that the power from his swings had grown ever more stronger from when he first started his attack. According to my calculations, he is becoming 10% stronger with each swing he does with the axe, ChatJK4 observed. Just as the tip of Chucky's axe was about to reach Michael, a large magic circle appeared beneath his feet and teleported him out into safety. Chucky swung his axe in midair, stopping his momentum entirely as he looked for Michael. Finally, he saw Michael back down in the arena. Your ability has something to do with your axe swings, right? You're getting stronger each time you use it. After hearing this, Chucky smiled. He swung his axe forward with the momentum carrying down towards Michael at incredibly fast speeds. He crash-landed on the ground, creating a crater on the soil and forming a dust cloud around him. That's right. My relentless effort at trying to hit you allows me to preserve the momentum of my swings, allowing me to become stronger and stronger. My axe will continue to grow in power until you can no longer keep up with my swings. The bronze bull above Chucky's head looked at Michael like he was a red flag in a bullfighting arena. The steam billowing out of its ears had grown intense enough to power a steam turbine. Chapter 443, Momentum stopped. Up above the arena, Claudia and Dickie discussed the fight, guessing who would win the battle. Chucky has gathered enough momentum by this point, Dickie said. It's impossible to stop him by now. Michael's best chance was when the fight first started. But unfortunately, he hadn't had a full grasp of Chucky's powers yet. Claudia couldn't help but agree. She had seen multiple fights between magnetics before and could tell that the momentum of the fight had swung towards Chucky's side from the very start. Michael was forced to go on the defensive as he tried to escape away from Chucky's axe swings. At first, it was easy since the weapon was quite heavy. But as his power grew, the weapon became too hard to dodge from. This forced Michael to continuously teleport away at the last second. Still, as the fight wore on, it would only be a matter of time until Chucky became too powerful to stop. But it's impressive that he's able to use a teleportation spell that often, Claudia commented. I never knew he was quite adept at magic. Dickie was surprised too. The only reason why Michael was able to hold on this long was because of his seemingly limitless mana capacity as well as his variety of useful spells. Back in the arena, Chucky stood on the ground, swinging his heavy axe with one hand like it was as light as a feather. The weapon in his hands started to blur from how fast it was swinging. Are you going to surrender now? Chucky asked. There's no way you could stop me now. But contrary to what others thought, Michael knew that the fight was far from over. He hadn't even started yet. Now that he had fully understood Chucky's ability, he easily found a way to counterattack. Come on. I don't want to hurt you, said Chucky. His sentiment was born out of worry. In his mind, he thought that if the fight wore on any longer, Michael could get seriously hurt. I guess it's time for me to show my hand, Michael said. He suddenly threw the drone in his hands towards Chucky. Chucky frowned as he saw the block of strange metal come towards him at very slow speeds. He didn't know what kind of weapon this was, but he knew that a single swing from his axe was enough to split it in half, especially with all of the preserved momentum he had from his swings. Sorry about this. Chucky shouted as he took his axe in both hands and swung it towards the drone. But it was at that moment that a buzzing sound echoed throughout the arena. The drone burst into life, with its propellers roaring with power. It suddenly shot up to the skies, surprising Chucky, Claudia, and Dickie. Chucky could only mutter out confused sounds as the drone stopped in the air as it reached its apex flight. And a moment later, it dove down towards Chucky at even faster speeds than when it flew. What kind of weapon is that? Claudia blurted out. It was clear from their viewing perspective that the drone was not a typical weapon that was thrown like a javelin. It flew all on its own. The agility it had within the air triumphed even that of eagles and birds. It seemed to freely swim through the skies with extreme precision and speed. This was not a weapon. This must have been an animal. Is this his ability? She asked out loud. Even Dickie was left speechless. But unlike Claudia, he knew that this was not Michael's ability. He could tell that the weapon wasn't being controlled by the power of the Godforge pieces. Instead, it was moving through those spinning things at the edges of the box. The greatest evidence of that was that Michael's diva had yet to appear above his figure. And as someone who worked with metals all his life, he recognized that the weapon was made with intricate mechanics and physics. But he knew that metals were not meant to fly like this. It was supposed to be impossible without the use of magic. Yet somehow, Michael was able to find a way to do so. Meanwhile, Chucky eyed the flying drone with flaring eyes. He loved the challenge of something new and mysterious. It doesn't matter. My momentum cannot be stopped, he declared. It was at this moment that the drone suddenly flew close towards Chucky and stopped right in front of him. The two looked at each other, man and machine. Is he trying to get that weapon destroyed? Dickie shouted from above. If Michael had full control of his weapon, then he should have used its aerial maneuverability to escape from Chucky's unstoppable momentum at all times. Yet, the drone faced Chucky as if challenging the very source of his confidence. Was its momentum really unstoppable? Chucky smiled, a bit annoyed and bemused by the inanimate object's challenge. He gripped his axe tight and swung it directly at the drone, intending to split it directly in half. His speed was far too fast for an ordinary eye to see. But at the very last moment, the drone suddenly tilted backwards and revealed its underside. And in a split second it released the spring mechanism and launched a metal switch from its dock. The switch attached itself to Chucky's forearm, stopping his movements completely. Meanwhile, his axe stayed stagnant in the air just a few inches away from hitting one of the drone's propellers. And for a full second, Chucky remained in this state, unaware of what was happening to him. But for the two people above, they saw everything as clear as day. It left them speechless. Their eyes were clearly trying to decipher what had happened, but they came up with nothing. It was as if they were frozen in time too. And as the second passed, the metal switch attached on Chucky's forearms started to twitch and vibrate before fully popping out. Chucky's momentum returned, with his swing continuing downwards. But now, the drone was nowhere to be found. It was gone in less than an instant. All of this felt strange to him. It felt like the world and time itself had zoomed forward in front of him. And as he looked at the axe in his hands, he realized that the momentum he had been conserving had vanished like it was nothing. His diva, the raging bronze bull, stopped releasing steam from its ears. Everything had reset to zero. What's happening? Chucky asked, his face betraying how clueless he truly felt. This is my ability. And unfortunately for you, it is a direct counter to your ability, Michael explained. A magic circle appeared in front of his palms as he conjured a 5-star fireball spell that launched towards Chucky at relatively fast speeds. With no momentum left in his axe, Chucky failed to protect himself from the upcoming bombardment. The fireball exploded directly in his chest, sending him flying towards the wall with dust and debris flying all over. A few seconds later, the dust settled. And as Michael approached, Chucky raised both of his hands in surrender. I lost, he said wearily. Chapter 444, Fulfilling the Agreement. Claudia and Dickie both floated down into the arena. The fight was over. In a huge upheaval at the very last minute of the fight, Michael was able to triumph against the ever-growing momentum of Chucky. They didn't know what happened, but they knew that it was enough to completely demolish what Chucky had been building all this time. And with his momentum gone, he was as defenseless as a baby, allowing Michael to win with a single spell. Chucky surrenders. Victory of the duel goes to Michael, Claudia proclaimed, but even with all her professionalism she couldn't help but add a tone of confusion in her voice. Chucky extinguished some flames from his clothes before forcing himself to stand up. Although he wasn't all that injured, he knew that he lost the moment his momentum disappeared. His only advantage during the fight was in the beginning when Michael had no idea about his abilities. Michael wouldn't have let him gather that much momentum again during the fight. And even if he somehow gained all of his momentum back, Michael's strange ability would have reset it all the way back to zero again. So, Chucky saved himself from the pain and surrendered. That was awesome, Chucky winced as he limped towards Michael. Your weapon, whatever it is something out of fantasy and books. It was a pleasure to fight with someone like you in such unorthodox ways. Michael approached him and they shook hands. It was a good and fair fight, he replied. This was his very first duel and he learned a lot from this experience. Most notably was the fact that information was the key to winning most duels. If he knew about Chucky's momentum ability, then he wouldn't have let the fight last that long. Congratulations, Michael. You won the duel, said Dickie. He seemed genuinely happy for Michael. Still, he couldn't help but express a little bit of frustration. Ugh, I'm so curious about your weapon and your ability. But I will not ask any questions. It's better for you to not say anything to me or anyone else. It'll be your advantage in future duels. As a senior, Dickie wanted to give some helpful advice to Michael. But this came at the cost to his own sanity, as he wouldn't be able to sleep well not knowing the truth about that flying weapon. I appreciate you for well, if you feel like wanting to tell it to someone more trustworthy, like a Montgomery perhaps, then you can just explain it to me, Claudia interrupted. She was the one who was most curious about Michael's powers. Somehow, Michael's ability was able to overpower a magnetic on the same cultivation as he was. This wasn't that surprising, but when she factored in that his weapon wasn't yet coated with Sue, then this didn't make any sense. She walked over to Michael and whispered to him. Is your ability about stopping momentum? She asked. Michael moved his head side to side. Kind of, yeah. Of course, he knew that this was not the extent of his ability, but it was the extent of his current powers. I hope you'll tell me more about that flying weapon, she said, nudging him. Michael gave out an awkward laugh. Maybe in the future. That seemed enough for her. With her curiosity a little bit satisfied, she returned into being the professional arbiter that she was supposed to be. This concludes the duel. As per your agreement, Chucky will perform the secret process of coating Sue onto a mithril relic with Michael observing closely. Chucky, are you ready to fulfill your promise? Despite being injured, Chucky flexed his biceps and nodded. A deal is a deal. And since it's for my new friend, I'll do it today. Michael felt a little bit guilty and wanted to push the date to the day after, but Chucky refused. You've shown me something extremely good with that flying weapon. It's my turn to show you something. Just accept his offer, Dickie whispered. Just like his ability, you can't stop his momentum once he's decided on something. Well, actually, maybe you can, but that's besides the point. Since Michael was pretty excited about this, he didn't refuse any longer. They all decided to head back to Metropolis so that Chucky could prepare for his coding process. They headed back with Claudia still following them around. Despite the duel being over, she still had the responsibility to make sure that the details of their agreement was followed through. She can't leave their side until Michael receives what he was owed. Once they returned to Metropolis, they immediately headed towards the basement in their Quench Company building, located beneath their very forge. This was where they fulfilled requests to coat mithril relics with Sue. It looked like a domed prison dungeon with no walls nor holes for anyone to come through. Everything was made out of stone bricks and was surrounded by thick layers of the earth. In the very middle of the dome was a large circular stage. Surrounding the perimeter of this stage were ancient and hieroglyphical markings that made it seem like this was a place made for ritual sacrifices. The candles placed on the ground to illuminate the dungeon didn't help its case. Chucky walked up to the circular stage. There was an uncharacteristic calmness in his face that made the atmosphere in the dungeon turn a little bit more solemn. He sat down in a lotus position in the center and turned towards Michael. There are 3 ingredients needed for the process of coating, Chucky explained. The first and most important part is the spirit of old. This is the most vital part of the process. Michael raised his hand. Soon, a shadow hole formed in his palms that soon revealed a single vial made out of dark green glass. This contained 4 drops of the spirit of old. He levitated the vial towards Chucky's hands. Chucky received the ingredient and nodded. For the first coating of your mithril relic, only 1 drop is needed. Next, give me the mithril relic that you wish to bind to your diva. Michael reached down his pockets and retrieved the drone. Its propellers jutted out to the side and it soon flew over and landed in front of Chucky's feet. Chucky had seen the drone before, but it was only now did he see it so up close and personal. He knew that this was a mithril relic, but he couldn't help but feel as if there was something different. Unable to figure it out, he just attributed it to its weird mechanics that allowed it to fly freely in the air. The last and final ingredient that I need is your blood. The very liquid of your life is what will bind this weapon to your diva and allow it to access the weapon for itself. Just a single drop is enough. Michael raised his finger and commanded the mana in his blood to seep out of his skin. A single drop of blood flowed from his finger and floated towards Chucky. Meanwhile, Chucky used his own spell to take out a single drop of Su from the vial. The strange, transparent, and viscous liquid floated in front of Chucky just as the blood arrived at his side. Chapter 445, Coating the Drone. Chucky closed his eyes as a pair of mirrored magic circles appeared beneath the 2 drops of liquids floating in front of him. Suddenly, Michael's drop of blood exploded into a fine mist, with Chucky's magic containing it in a single space. The small, microscopical droplets of blood then began to quiver and vibrate as some kind of magic took command of their very existence. Chucky waved his hands around, with their gathering at his fingertips. The wind that he summoned moved the red blood cells to connect from end to end, creating a red string that revolved around the drop of Su. This image reminded Michael of a visual representation of an atom with the Su as its nucleus and the blood droplets as the electrons that surrounded it. Chucky is trying to bond your blood with the spirit of old, explained Dickie. This is a fine technique that can only be performed through a specific innate skill inherited in the Hephaestus bloodline. Michael watched as the blood started to bombard the Su drop as it tried to forcefully integrate itself into the other. While he appreciated the show, ChatJK4 worked in the background to analyze the spell Chucky used to achieve this kind of effect. Magic theory acquired. With each crash between the spirit of old and Michael's blood, a strange phenomenon started to occur. The very structure of the Su itself began to change, taking on the helix structure of Michael's DNA. What surprised Michael most about this was that the process was not made through Chucky's magic, but through the natural properties of the Su itself. He didn't even sense any sort of magic from it when it did so. He only felt the same surge of power from the Godforge pieces in his heart. Su contains the same power as the Godforge pieces? Michael wondered. It was no wonder why this specific type of liquid was used to enhance the abilities of a magnetic. It basically contained the same power as a Godforge piece. The process is done, Dickie whispered to Michael. He didn't want to disturb Chucky while he was concentrating. Now, all he needs to do is to evenly spread the new mixture of Su into your mithril artifact. This is absolutely crucial. He can't use too much or too little. He needs to cover the entire surface area of the weapon with Su. But as Chucky was about to coat Su into the drone, he stopped. Usually, this was a trivial matter for someone like him. However, that was for normal weapons that he was already familiar with. The drone, on the other hand, was completely different from what he was used to. He didn't know its exact specifications, he didn't know where the handle began and where the blades started. If he were to coat Su into this weapon, he would essentially be going in blind. I can't do this, he said. Michael, maybe you can do it yourself. Seeing the seriousness of the situation, Michael nodded and stepped up for the task. Since this was his weapon anyway, then it was only right that it was his responsibility to do it. Just then, he felt Dickie's hand on his shoulder. I just want you to be careful, he warned. Failure means that you will waste the drop of Su you used as well as the weapon itself. Michael nodded, turning ever more serious as he walked up the circular stage. He then sat face to face with Chucky with his drone floating in the air and the mixture of Su slowly revolving around it. What do I need to do? He asked. I assume you know how to do a simple telekinesis spell. Just take control of the Su and gently rub it across the surface of your weapon. Make sure that the point of contact between the two is minimal. As Chucky relinquished his control over to Michael, he was surprised to see that the boy showed no signs of nervousness despite how crucial they described this process to be. It was as if his nerves were made out of steel. Of course, if Michael was doing it by himself, he would be nervous as heck. But thankfully, he had a partner in his mind who prided themselves in precision. Taking control of the Su mixture. The droplet of Su floated over to his drone at a normal speed, just like rain. But for Chucky, this speed was way too fast. He wanted to warn Michael to slow down. However, he knew that he could break his concentration and make the situation even worse. So, Dickie and Chucky could only watch as the drop of Su shot towards the drone. Just when it looked like it would crash, the drop suddenly stopped at the very last moment, keeping only a small point of contact with the drone. And then, the drop suddenly raced across the surface of the drone, leaving behind a shiny texture in its wake. The drop started to paint the drone like a lawnmower boosted 10x in speed. Its movement was meticulous, never crossing an area where it had already crossed over. Dickie and Chucky watched as the drop sped through the drone from the bottom to the top without stopping, completing the entire coding process in even less time than a pin could drop from a roof. And judging by the complete shiny texture of the drone that the coding was done successfully with no errors whatsoever. Of course, this was because ChatJK4 designed the drone itself, so it knew its measurements down to the micrometer. It's coded? Just like that. Dickie doubted. Even our ancestors can't do it that fast. And it's on a weapon that is extremely complex and unorthodox. Dickie had the urge to ask Michael to simply become part of the Quench Company as one of their officers. But he stopped himself, knowing that it was an insult to Michael's own company. What do I do next? Is it done? Chucky composed himself and answered. You have to touch your weapon and make contact with it, said Chucky. You will feel a connection with it. It's a weird sensation, but you have to get used to it, Dickie explained. Michael looked at the floating drone in the air. Upon first inspection, he didn't feel much difference from the drone aside from its glossy texture due to the coating. However, as he raised his hand and got closer to it, he felt a weird tingling sensation in his skin. It felt the same way when he got in contact with the Godforge piece for the first time. And just like the Godforge piece, the drone seemed to be attracted to his skin as it suddenly shot towards his palms like a bullet. And upon the moment of contact, Michael felt a jolting sensation that woke up his entire body. He had to close his eyes as the sensation transcended the physical and reached the mental. An unknown software is trying to make contact with your soul. ChatJK4's voice rang out, intercepting the software to determine its origin and its purpose. Connection established. Software determined not to be hostile. Integrating software into your mind. Initiating emergency shutdown of all physical and mental faculties for the integration of the software. Upon contact with the drone, Michael's body suddenly slumped down into the ground, unconscious. Chapter 446, Unconscious Dreaming. Michael felt himself stir with his consciousness slowly awakening. What? What happened? He asked out loud. His voice echoed through an endless black space. It didn't even sound like it came out of his mouth. It sounded like it came from his very surroundings itself. He felt awake, but he knew that this wasn't the awake that he was used to. It felt like he was still in the middle of dreaming, only experiencing a momentary lucidness. He looked down and saw nobody he inhabited. He was just a disembodied idea or consciousness that floated in the eternal endless black space that surrounded him. This reminded him of when he first died and experienced reincarnation. Except this time he felt like he was simply in the middle of a dream. ChatJK4, what's happening? Hello, Michael? A few seconds later, the female voice of his personal AI assistant echoed out from the endless voice. This time, the voice wasn't directly transmitted to his head. It sounded like it came from an actual source, as if ChatJK4 was actually somewhere in his vicinity. Where am I? As he tried to piece together what he last remembered, the image of him touching the drone flashed through his mind. I just finished coding my drone with Sue. After that, I passed out, he remembered. That is right. Your connection with the mithril artifact caused an unknown software to be downloaded directly into your brain. I was about to delete the software for your safety, but the Godforge pieces pulsated with power and warned me not to do so. After confirming that the software was intended for you to connect to your diva, I started to integrate its coding into my own software. However, doing so was extremely dangerous for your well-being. And if I had not initiated an emergency shutdown of your bodily functions, it would have caused damage to your consciousness. This was not the first time that this happened. ChatJK4 also had to shut him down when it was first upgraded into its second iteration. Did it work? He asked. Yes. Your diva took control of the integration of the software, making the transition seamless. Did you talk to it? The diva did not respond to any of my attempts at communication. It did its job like it was normal, just like how an organ operated without sentience. Michael knew that there was something going on with his diva and his abilities. After all, he knew that other magnetics definitely didn't experience this kind of software update once they connected with their mithril relics. Is it because I used a mithril artifact? Or because I'm a natural magnetic? The most likely answer is that it is a combination of both. He started to relax once ChatJK4 explained to him what happened. I'm guessing I'm still unconscious. Correct. Your physical body is currently still in hibernation mode. Chucky and Dickie transported you to a much safer location once they saw you collapse. Right now, you are in the association's headquarters under Claudia's purview. She has contacted the Rebornian employees still in the market plaza and informed them of what had happened. Your family is on their way here now as we speak. He didn't know how he was going to explain this to everybody, but he was going to deal with that later. Why am I here then? Suddenly, a large text appeared in front of him. It had the same style and font as the system interface that ChatJK4 used frequently. Mithril Artifact, Drone. Spirit of Old, 1 drop. Right below the text was an exact 3D visualization of his drone, slowly rotating in its axis and showing off all its sides. What is this? This is from the software that was downloaded from the Mithril Artifact. I have made it into a system interface for your convenience. The drone's different parts were highlighted and given its own names, like the propellers, the frame, and its underside. Please touch the propellers, said ChatJK4. Following the instructions, Michael reached out towards the floating drone in front of him and focused on the 4 blades attached on all 4 sides. And as soon as he did, the other parts of the 3D drone lost all of their highlights, leaving only a glowing shine on the 4 propellers. Not only that, but the image zoomed in into one of the blades, showing Michael an almost transparent image that showcased the mechanical structure of the very part itself. Propeller system. Stealth. Muffled propellers. Speed. Double blades. As he saw the interface in front of him, Michael's face slowly transformed into one of awe and excitement. Is this what I think it is? The new software allows you to upgrade certain parts and improve upon its design. Each upgrade can be purchased by using the SU that you have coded into the mithril artifact. He clicked on the stealth option and saw a much more detailed explanation for the first upgrade. Muffled propellers. This upgrade will lower the noise of the blades, allowing for more stealthy approaches. Anyone beyond a 10-meter sphere around the drone will not hear any sound coming from the propellers. Cost, 1 drop. And when he clicked on the speed option, he saw a similar description. Double blades. This upgrade increases the speed of the drone to 2 times its natural limit. Its maneuverability in the air will not be affected. Cost, 1 drop. These were all useful upgrades that significantly increased the battle effectiveness of his drone. The muffled propellers, for instance, would be an extremely useful one, as it would allow him to keep the mystery and element of surprise for his drone. People would have less time to figure out what it was if they only heard it once it was already too close to them. As for the speed boost, although it didn't look all that useful now, it would be extremely useful if he dueled against someone who specialized in speed. After all, his switches only worked if it got attached to its target. And if his target was too fast, then it would be hard to use. The only way he could purchase these upgrades was if he used the drop of SU he used to code it. And luckily he already had 1 drop ready to spend. He felt incredibly tempted to purchase the stealth option, but in the end he restrained himself. He knew that there were other options for upgrades, not just for the propellers but for the entire drone itself. Can you show me all the upgrades for the drone? ChatJK4 showed him a system interface resembling a game skill tree. There were 5 upgrade systems in total. Vision. Camera. Drone vision. Weapon. Unity firearms. Unity gun. Ability. Switch inventory. Propeller. Stealth. Muffled propeller. Speed. Double blades. Frame. Stealth. Camouflage. Invisibility. Defense. Unity shield. Expansion. Drones. Mini drone. Morph. Reduce. Enlarge. His eyes widened as he saw the array of upgrades that he could do with his drone. Each one tempted him just from one single word alone. The camouflage and the invisibility upgrades were something that immediately caught his eye. But then there were also the Unity firearms, which made the drone have offensive capabilities of its own. He dreamed more than now than ever that he had all the SU he could ever want. Chapter 447, More Choices. For now, Michael wasn't thinking of buying the defense upgrade. His mithril artifact was already sturdy enough as it was. And since other magnetics only had access to mithril relics that were partially degraded, his drone would always win out in a battle of sturdiness. Of course, that doesn't take into account abilities. So if he had any spare SU in the future, he would definitely purchase this upgrade. The next system upgrade was something that caught his eye from the very start. It was titled Expansion, with a couple of interesting upgrades. The first one being related to drones. As he picked on this option, the 3D drone suddenly split in half horizontally like a briefcase opening fully. The interior of the drone showed a smaller box that fit perfectly into an indent inside. As the drone finished opening, the smaller box inside started to pulsate with light, just like a computer booting up to start. For miniature propellers mechanically folded outwards before starting to rotate. The blades gave enough lift for the smaller, miniature drone to take flight. Mini drone. This upgrade allows you to create a miniature drone that is linked to the main drone. If the camera upgrade is purchased, then you will be able to see through the mini drone and control it just like the main drone. The mini drone doesn't have any capacity to store any switches, but can pick them up and attach them to any surface. The mini drone doesn't have any offensive capabilities. Cost, 1 drop. This upgrade would be very useful if he needed to keep track of a lot of things in the battlefield. Just like the description said, he would be able to see through the mini drone just like the main one, giving him even more vision in the fight. Being able to simultaneously attach switches onto 2 different targets using 2 drones was very tempting for Michael. And since the cost was only 1 drop, Michael considered whether this would be part of his shopping spree later. Of course, he had to rein in his impulse. There were still 2 upgrade options that he could buy. Reduce. This upgrade will allow the drone to significantly reduce at the push of a button. This reduction will increase the speed of the drone but will decrease its offensive capabilities. Cost, 1 drop. Enlarge. This upgrade will allow the drone to significantly increase in size. The offensive capabilities of the drone will increase, but its speed will take a hit. Cost, 1 drop. The Reduce upgrade turned the drone into something that was as small as a bird and could fit neatly on top of his palms. Meanwhile, the Enlarge option turned the drone as big as an eagle. It was big enough that a human could step on top of it and ride it like a hovercraft. Both options were useful in very specific circumstances. The Reduce option increased its stealth capabilities, allowing it to maneuver through tight spaces that only small rodents could pass through. If he wanted to infiltrate a fortress, then he would definitely consider buying this upgrade. As for the enlarge option, Michael didn't really see much of a reason to buy this upgrade. Having a larger drone can be useful, but only if he had already bought the Unity gun upgrade. Out of all the options available, he would buy this upgrade last. All in all, these enhancements would completely change the way that he used his drone. And it looks like these weren't the only ones that he could buy. Throughout the options, he always saw the appear next to the upgrades. It was easy to guess that these options were hidden upgrades that he would only get once he had bought the previous upgrade before it. So many options. What do I need to buy? Right now, he only has 1 drop of Su to spend. That was because the first coating only needed 1 to establish a connection with him and the mithril artifact. However, he still had 3 drops of Su from the vial left. If he hadn't passed out, then Chucky would have helped him coat his mithril artifact with all of those drops. This means that I can only buy 1 upgrade for now. He pondered. And although there were a lot of options, his focus eventually landed on 1 single upgrade. The camera. This was such a substantial upgrade from his normal drone that it was the first one that he truly needed to get. If he only had 1 Su to spend, then getting this upgrade would be the most cost-efficient since the value it gave him was better than what the other upgrades could offer him. ChatJK4, I want to purchase the drone vision. Understood. You have consumed 1 drop of Su. The drone will begin its upgrade automatically. The 3D projection of the drone started to morph. Circular indents appeared on the top and bottom sides of the drone. And slowly, these nanoparticles started to form through the indent, creating the 360-degree glass camera from the ground up. This process reminded him of how his own diva formed. Except this time, the formation was through an actual object in reality, not just a projection that could not be interacted with. It made much more sense now that these mithril artifacts were considered a link to the diva. Magic wasn't the one creating morphing the drone into something entirely new. It was the power in his Godforge pieces. Clearly, it was now connected with his drone. The upgrade will finish once you have woken up from your slumber. Would you like to sleep to pass the time? With nothing else to do, Michael accepted. Soon, his consciousness started to fade away, losing sight of the dark space all around him. Even the system interface for the drone had disappeared, leaving Michael to drift off into sleep. A few hours later, Michael felt light hitting his closed eyes. As he slowly woke from his slumber, his eyes opened, which was almost immediately blinded by the rays of the sun peeking out from the window. He blinked and immediately got up from the bed. He looked around and didn't recognize where he was. But judging from the pillars and the domed ceilings, Michael guessed that he was somewhere in the association's headquarters, just like ChatJK4 said he was. Just then, he noticed that there was something heavy on his feet. He looked down and saw someone sleeping on his legs. He saw her long black hair sprawled along the bed and immediately recognized who she was. Yuna, he called out to her. Yuna slowly awoke and turned in his direction. She rubbed her eyes before immediately flashing a smile once she realized he was already up. Morning. Looks like someone had a good sleep, he said to her. Just then, he felt a pinch on his legs that made him wince in pain. Ow. Yuna glared at him. You don't get to talk. You slept for a whole day and a half and had us all worried. Michael scratched his head. Thanks for the concern, but I'm fine now. I'm more than fine. He then used his shadow skill to take out the vial of Su from his inventory, eyeing it with a smile. Chapter 448, Choices. Michael first looked at the first system upgrade in the interface, the vision system. For the camera option, there was only 1 upgrade he could purchase. Once he clicked on this option, the 3D drone shifted to show an entirely new section of its frame. An upper half of the sphere was located at the top of the drone, while the lower half was located in its underbelly. It reminded him of the 360-degree view cameras that were so popular back in his previous life. Drone Vision. This upgrade gives you access to an entirely new feature of the drone. The camera installed in its frame will allow you to see through the drone's eye view, essentially controlling it through a first-person perspective. Cost, 1 drop. Despite being able to control the drone any way he liked because of his supreme skill, he was essentially limited to what he could see from his own perspective. This meant that if he maneuvered the drone towards an area where he had no visibility whatsoever, then his control over the drone would mean nothing, as he wouldn't be able to move it as he liked. But with this new camera feature, he'd be able to see through the world as a drone. ChatJK4, does this camera work through abilities? Yes. Any and all features of the drone will work through despite any interference or tampering done by another ability, given that your ability is stronger than the ability of your opponent. Now, this was something that Michael knew he needed immediately. He had yet to meet a lot of other magnetics, but it was easy to imagine that there could be some people whose entire ability revolved around illusions or stealth. And because those were made through the powers of the Godforge pieces, he wouldn't be able to counter them through his magic alone. It wouldn't work. But with this camera upgrade, he would essentially have an entirely new set of vision that was focused on divas and abilities. Of course, his vision was limited by his own cultivation, but at least he knew that he wouldn't be completely blind during those times. Michael decided that this would be the first thing he upgraded since it only cost 1 drop of Su. I'll reserve 1 drop for his upgrade. But for now, I'll continue to look at the other options. Moving on to the weapons system, one of the upgrade was an option to add a Unity gun to the drone. Upon clicking it, the drone changed positions once again to show the long sides of its body. What was usually just a flat piece of frame now had one long barrel on both sides that jutted out from a square opening. His drone looked like an ancient wooden ship that had gun ports on its hull. The cannons themselves were thin and resembled antennas more than barrels of a gun. Now this is tempting. Those two weapons on its side added with a 360-degree camera made for an insane combination. He could essentially fight using only his drone with his real body tucked away into safety. One of the limitations of his drone was that he could only make it go as far as he could see. But if he had the camera, he had a feeling that he could control it regardless of how far away he was from his body. Your assumptions are correct, said ChatJK4. The camera upgrade transports your consciousness into the drone itself, allowing you to transfer your supreme skill into the drone. However, this means that your body will remain in one place, unable to move whenever you are controlling the drone yourself. With the camera function, he could go as far away as he wanted. But it came at the cost of his own body being stagnant. It was a trade-off, one that Michael considered unfortunate but fair. Still, it was an upgrade worth purchasing. If paired with the Unity gun upgrade, then he didn't even need to move anyway. He moved on to the next option for the weapons, which was something made for his ability. Switch inventory. This upgrade will increase the amount of switches that the drone can carry up to 10. Its launching speed will double its velocity. Cost, 1 drop. He wasn't that in a hurry to upgrade the switch capacity of his drone because 3 was all he realistically needed. However, the launching speed was incredibly useful to have since it would give less time for his opponent to react. I'll reserve this upgrade for later, especially since the next option is crucial. The frame system also had stealth upgrades that he needed. Once he clicked on this option, he saw the main frame of the drone itself get highlighted. Camouflage. This upgrade turns the surface of the drone into something that adapts into its surroundings. Cost, 1 drop. The drone's surface morphed, creating hexagonal shapes all along its area. These large polygons contained even more smaller hexagons that shimmered and changed into different colors. As if showing him an example, a simulated environment of a forest appeared behind the drone. And as the drone slowly moved towards the crowns of the trees, the hexagonal shapes shimmered before changing its colors into different shades of green. Now, this was still only a camouflage, meaning that if one looked closely, they could see the outline of the drone sticking out from the leaves. If someone was actively looking for a drone and knew its exact shape and specifications, then they could easily see through the camouflage. Despite its flaws, Michael still considered buying this upgrade. After all, people from this world knew nothing about drones. And if he kept it that way, even a simple camouflage would become almost invisible in their eyes. And coupled with the muffled propellers, this was enough to make the drone a lot stealthier than before. However, there was still another upgrade available to the drone. This time, it was real invisibility. Invisibility. This upgrade allows the drone to become completely invisible. Cost, 2 drops. As he clicked on this option, the drone suddenly shimmered before completely disappearing in front of his eyes. It was gone. This is the perfect stealth. He would have immediately purchased this upgrade if not for the price. 2 drops of SU. Now for the benefit of stealth, this was a very worthy purchase. However, he thought that it was much better to purchase other upgrades for now because those 2 drops could buy him 2 different upgrades, which would be a better use for his SU. Another upgrade for the frame system was for defense. Unity Shield. This upgrade allows the drone to gain its own shield that regenerates over time. Cost, 1 drop. ChatJK4. When using the camera function, will I still be able to use my spells? Yes. When piloting the drone, you can use any spell that you know. Since your supreme skill is transported with you when piloting, you are able to manipulate mana the same way you had been able to normally. This meant that whenever he piloted the drone, it would have the absolute Unity defense activated even if he didn't buy this upgrade. However, that was only when he piloted it himself. If he wasn't, then the drone wouldn't have any defenses aside from its natural strength as a mithril artifact. Chapter 449, Upheaval. Meanwhile, in a faraway land east of Metropolis, there was a small village located on a shore. They lived, breathed, and ate fish with many dried fishes hanging around the thatch roofs. Since it was a nice day outside with no cloud near the sun to obstruct its rays, many fishermen decided to set out with their wooden boats towards the middle of the sea. This was usually dangerous as the large waves crashing through the seas was enough to topple even the biggest of boats. However, because the weather was so calm today, they decided to risk it in order to set out for today to find exotic fishes living deeper in the seafloor. However, as the first boats started to paddle through the waves, the light suddenly dimmed unexpectedly. The fishermen immediately looked to the skies to see if there were any signs of storms in the distance. Some groaned, thinking that they had to postpone their fishing trip. But as they squinted their eyes and looked up at the skies, they realized that it was not a cloud that blocked the sun. It was dragons. To be more exact, they were transport wyverns from the draconic race. With their large backs and their strong and durable wings, these dragons were used to transport items and people through extremely long distances. These kinds of visits weren't exactly rare, but they weren't common either. Throughout the year, there would be quite a few visits from these wyverns as some visitors landed on the royal continent. However, the amount of wyverns in the sky wasn't just one. It wasn't just 2 or 3 or even 10. There must have been thousands of them up in the skies, completely obscuring the sun in the heavens. Holy! Are we getting invaded? Oh dear God! These fishermen had no idea what was happening. They just hoped that they wouldn't be part of any conflicts that arose from their arrival. There were, however, some people who knew what was happening. Somewhere in the fishing village, there were a few traveling merchants who came here to sell some stuff from Metropolis. And judging from the emblem he wore on his chest, this peddler was employed by none other than the biggest business in Metropolis, the Gilderin Company, owned by none other than Alaric Goldstone. The peddler looked up at the skies and saw the giant wyverns crossing the seas. It was clear that their arrival was imminent. They finally arrived, murmured the peddler with excitement filling in his eyes. He immediately took out a piece of paper and wrote only 2 words, "They're here." Then he immediately abandoned his own stall and ran for the tallest mountain he could find. He rolled up the message into a tiny scroll and attached it to the back of a carrier pigeon with a string. "Return," he commanded the pigeon as he released it into the air. The bird quickly flew up high in the skies, with its destination headed straight for Metropolis. And he wasn't the only one who noticed the arrival of the wyverns. People from other towns and villages close to the shore noticed the obvious swarm of dragons in the distance. It wasn't long before all kinds of pigeons were thrown up in the skies in an attempt to spread the word to their superiors as fast as possible. The news eventually spread to Metropolis itself. Even if some companies decided to keep it to themselves, there was an obvious tension within the territory that made it obvious that something was happening in the background. And with a little bit of digging, it was easy to discover the arrival of the wyverns. Everyone started to stir. All companies who had kept their heads down low started to move and become active once again, acting like a volcano about to erupt. This was a huge event that could shake the very foundation of not only Metropolis, but every other territory in the Queen's region. Why? That was because their arrival officially commenced the beginning of a new era, one where long-distance travel was a lot safer and more affordable. The long-awaited agreement between the Ocean King and the Draconic Queen had finally started to show progress. Those wyverns contained the very first batch of tourists coming from all over the globe to visit the royal continent. These tourists didn't just bring themselves here for the experience, but they also brought with them the opportunity for global trade. Many companies saw this as an opportunity to rise through the ranks. If they could snatch the attention of these foreigners, then they could possibly break through their own ranks and transcend into the next level. Heck, it wasn't just the low companies that felt this way. Even the large companies thought this way, and most especially the conglomerates. This was the very reason why the competition for the Golden Road started in the first place. Their arrival set the stage for an upheaval. Those that prepared for this moment would be able to be among the first to strike. First impressions last, so they would have the advantage in the coming years once more and more foreigners came to the continent. For Alaric and the other legacies, the plan was simple. They had to make moves even before the foreigners arrived. And they will arrive. After all, Metropolis was a giant capital city and would be the first among many that would gather a significant amount of tourists. Alaric sent a message to the other legacies. The game begins. Winner takes all. Bobby and Aerith smiled as they received this message. Even if Alaric hadn't said anything, they would have already treated this as the real competition. Although they were all friends with each other, that didn't mean that they weren't competitive against each other. They still had their own ambitions. And they knew that competition was what drove them to become better than what they were before. Alaric's message was meant to rile them up. It was meant to say that he will not hold back, and neither should they. If one of them was able to triumph against the others, then they would accept it as their loss. Winner takes all. And of course, it wasn't just the legacies who had something to gain from the arrival of the tourists. The Duke of Metropolis, the Knightly Court, and the Magic Tower were all in a state of preparation and movement. They were anticipating all the actions of the different factions inside Metropolis and how they would react to such a news. And perhaps the one who was having the most headaches right now was none other than the leader of the Metropolis Association, Claudia Montgomery. She buried her head in a heap of paperwork, seeking to have a moment of peace. Yet the constant reports she got from her employees prevented her from having any reprieve. Madam, the Snake Charmers have issued a formal challenge to the Pietris. They are requesting our mediation. I have just received word about the Ink Blotters issuing a duel against the Ink Splatters. More and more duels popped up by the second. Every company in Metropolis was hungry to get a head start before the tourists' arrival. Chapter 450, Lots of Duels. Ugh! Claudia groaned. She was not expecting the arrival of the wyverns to be ahead of schedule. Even they weren't prepared for such an upheaval. Madam, there's more requests for duels today than we've ever had in a month, complained one of her employees. Seeing as her subordinates were starting to get flustered, Claudia immediately took charge. Don't worry about the duels. I have already sent word to my family and they will send in reinforcements to become arbiters. Since only Montgomerys were allowed to mediate between duels, Claudia had to ask her family for some assistance or else she herself would get buried with requests for duels. It was still manageable for now with their current staff in the association, but that would quickly change in the coming days. She predicted she would have a constant headache ever since those wyverns arrived on the continent's shores. Miss Claudia. There's been some development in the Upperwood District Festival. Claudia sighed. She almost forgot that there was still an ongoing permit test in the festival. It was such bad timing that the wyverns arrived in the middle of a competitive festival. Now it has become even more competitive than ever. What is it? She asked. There's been a lot of activity in Main Street, Miss Claudia. A lot of people have been requesting us to mediate some arguments about the ownership of land there. Claudia frowned. As far as she knew, Main Street was actually one of the quieter streets in the Upperwood district. The flow of foot traffic there was very minimal and was mostly traversed by horses and carriages. And during the festival, the number of people that go there was even less. She had to look at the map of the Upperwood district just to confirm her thoughts. Why would they have arguments about this land? She muttered out. It's because of this, said one of her employees as he handed out a parchment to her. Claudia looked at the paper and noticed that it was a map of Metropolis itself. However, there was a certain pathway in this map that was highlighted with red paint. Her eyes then flowed to the top of the page. Welcome Parade for Global Tourists, A. Brought to you by the Gilder and Company. As it turned out, Alaric planned for a welcoming parade once the tourists arrived in Metropolis. This was a very smart play from him, as he would be able to control the flow of traffic from the tourists and therefore control the flow of money. And since his company was so influential in Metropolis, the general public quickly accepted this parade route as something definite. This was the advantage of preparation. Judging from how well thought out the parade path was, it seemed as if Alaric had been planning for this for a long time. And because he learned about the arrival of the wyverns so early, he was able to prepare these parchments that he spread throughout Metropolis. Knowing that they wouldn't be able to compete with Alaric and his company, a lot of companies then resorted to simply following his route and taking advantage of it. Claudia realized that this was where all the duels originated from. A lot of companies were vying for those lands that were directly on the path of the parade route. They wanted possession of those territories so that they could establish a store or a building bearing their company's name. That way, they would be the first ones the tourists would see during the parade. And coincidentally, the Main Street of the Upperwood district was part of the highlighted route. Claudia looked at her scrolls and tried to see who was currently in possession of Main Street. And surprisingly, it was owned by no one. This was because Main Street used to be a part of the Flarecorp company. Ever since they were excommunicated from Metropolis, all of their territories have been picked apart by the legacies to take for themselves. Still, there were a few pieces here and there that were left behind, just like Main Street. Many companies ignored this piece of land at first because the foot traffic there was bad, but now it was being fought over by every single company in the Upperwood district. So now everybody's trying to get a piece of this land, huh? Claudia could only curse Alaric inwardly for picking such a bad timing for announcing the parade route. What am I going to tell Michael? She grumbled. When Main Street was an unwanted piece of land, Claudia decided to give the land to Michael for him to establish his Reborn company. She thought that this was the perfect place since they had done so well during the Upperwood District Festival. They already had customers from this area, so it would be a good starting point for their company to build up on. Unfortunately, the appearance of the wyverns changed all of that. Now, other companies had set their sights on the land and were already planning on getting it for themselves. They received a lot of duel requests already, and she expected more would come in the coming days. She had no authority to strip the land away from anyone, especially since it was so sought after by everyone else. What should we do, Miss Claudia? There's nothing we can do but fulfill their requests for the duels, she sighed. Whoever wins will ultimately receive Main Street. Even the other employees felt bad once they heard this. We're already quite biased towards Michael because of his ballpoint pen, so they were all rooting for him to succeed. Unfortunately, the competition was far too fierce for a boy like him. Claudia couldn't help but think back to yesterday when she saw Michael's true strength firsthand. She knew that Michael had a chance to win against the other companies competing for Main Street. If everything had gone smoothly, then he could have had a chance. But unfortunately, he passed out during the coating of his mithril weapon. She had even asked the help of a healer from Aretha's apothecary, but even they could not explain Michael's unexpected unconsciousness. The healer didn't even know when he would wake up. They didn't know if it was tomorrow, a month from now, or even a year from now. She could only hope that he would wake up before the duels started. Let's go deal with the duels, she said to her employees. Michael looked at the vial of Sue in his hands, seeing 3 drops still left inside. After knowing what these drops of Sue were worth, he couldn't help but think of them as even more precious than his own life. 3 drops. 3 upgrades, he muttered. He then took out the drone from his pockets and saw the change that it had undergone. It's not just a dream, he rejoiced. 2 halves of a sphere were planted on the top and at the bottom of the drone, acting as a 360-degree view camera for him to see through. He was surprised to see that the addition was made out of mithril as well, despite him not giving anything for it to mold. Did the mithril grow because of Sue? Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.